Hey guys, tonight we're sliding back into powdered wigs, velvet wallpaper, and the heavy scent of rosewater lingering through the polished halls of Versailles. You're not just anyone in this story. You're a royal child, born into the most elite and pressure-cooked household in Europe. The moment you open your eyes, the world bows, literally. Servants whisper your name in corridors, noble women weep upon catching a glimpse of your frilled cradle, and the press writes about how your tiny hand once brushed against a gold rattle shaped like a fleur-de-lis. But before we get too cozy in all this decadence, let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. I mean, yes, you're the child of Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI, the literal Queen and King of France, but this is pre-revolutionary France, and things are about to get historically, violently unfun. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me where you're tuning in from, what city and what time is it for you right now? I love seeing the range. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world begins with silk and suspicion. You're born in a chamber so elaborately decorated, it could make a Fabergé egg feel underdressed. Courtiers line the walls, watching with the sort of intrusive reverence as your mother gives birth under candlelight surrounded by more nobles than medical personnel. Because yes, when a royal baby is born, it has to be public. The whole kingdom needs proof that you're a legitimate heir. So no pressure, right? Your first cries echo in a room so thick with perfume and powdered wigs, it might as well be a masquerade ball. You're the firstborn, or maybe the second. History gives us a few children to choose from, but tonight, you're the royal child. So let's say you're Marie-Thérèse, the daughter born after years of speculation about whether your Austrian-born mother could even produce an heir. You come into the world not as a person, but as a political achievement. You're less of a baby and more of a victory banner sewn in pink silk. The court rejoices, France rejoices, your mother cries. Not because she's overcome with emotion, but because you're not a boy. That's the truth of it. Even your warm swaddled body can't shield you from the disappointment that you didn't come with a future crown. Still, the celebration continues. You're baptized in a gold font. Your godparents are emperors and empresses who don't even attend. Just proxies sent in carriages that cost more than most villages. You sleep in a cradle carved by artists who are probably forbidden to even sneeze near it. Every detail of your nursery is tailored to impress. Imported linens, painted ceiling cherubs, and toys made of ivory, silver, and gilt-trimmed mahogany. At night, your wet nurse rocks you under the gaze of oil portraits. Ancestors watching, judging, eternally powdered. Outside Versailles, however, things aren't so picture-perfect. The people are hungry, France is broke, but that's not your problem, yet. For now, your life is ruled by the etiquette of the court. You're taught how to nod, when to smile, and exactly how low to bow, even before you learn to walk properly. There's a protocol for everything, including your nap schedule. It's exhausting being a toddler in a monarchy. You can't just cry when you want milk, you must be presented with it in a delicate porcelain cup, and it better be warm goat's milk from a certified royal goat. But despite the showy layers, your early years are oddly human. Marie Antoinette, for all her royal baggage, really does try to be a good mum. She doesn't want you raised entirely by governesses, she wants to be there. She builds you a playhouse on the grounds of the Petit Trianon, her personal escape palace, complete with tiny furniture and working shutters. You're allowed, gasp, to run barefoot in the gardens. She even lets you keep a lamb, which is scandalous. Royals aren't supposed to touch animals unless they're being hunted or served with wine. There's one peculiar moment during your infancy that later historians still scratch their heads over. One day, the Queen insists on dressing you in plain white muslin instead of embroidered silk. She wants you to look like a real child. The court nearly faints. Muslin, that's peasant fabric. The portrait from that day still exists, and it's both sweet and symbolic. It shows a queen trying to be a mother trying to be real, and a child trapped in a silk-gilded contradiction. Meanwhile, your father, Louis XVI, is there. He's not a natural with kids, but he tries. He's more interested in clocks and locks, literally. He spends hours in his workshop tinkering with mechanisms and gears, escaping the weight of the crown through screws and springs. Sometimes he brings you mechanical toys. Once he gives you a little bird in a gilded cage that sings when you crank a handle. You love it, and he smiles the kind of rare, quiet smile that makes you wonder what he could have been if he'd been born a locksmith instead of a king. Back in your room, you're surrounded by attendants. You're never alone. Privacy is a foreign concept. When you cry at night, 5 people come running, one to light the candles, one to summon the governess, one to open the windows, one to fetch water, and one to just stand there and nod gravely. You're both cherished and imprisoned. There's a historical debate among scholars about how much of your early life was truly idyllic. Some argue you had genuine moments of joy and love, especially with your mother. Others say that even those moments were shaped by the ever-watchful eyes of Versailles, and that even playtime was performative. What's the truth? Probably somewhere in between. After all, your lullabies are sung in French, your lullaby singers are rotated every month by decree, and your lullaby schedule is, yes, tracked by your governess in official reports. But you don't know all this yet. Right now you're just lying in a velvet cradle, staring up at a ceiling painted with angels, while everyone around you bows, curtsies, or strategizes your marriage. You've been alive for less than a year, and already the future of a dynasty rests in your tiny, wrinkled hands. Sleep tight. You're barely out of swaddling clothes before the etiquette lesson begin. It's not just please and thank you. You're trained in the art of the royal nod, the pace of the royal stroll, and how to hold your hands like they're made of porcelain. You're watched constantly. A sneeze, someone records it. A tooth comes in, it's documented like a solar eclipse. Even your tantrums are studied by your tutors and dissected by courtiers like they're trying to read the future in them. You're not just a child, you're a symbol, a vessel for politics and legacy, and that means every hiccup matters. Your governess is strict but elegant, a woman who smells faintly of lavender and has a voice like cooled honey. She runs your daily life with precision, like clockwork, only the gears are you. She manages your clothing, your meals, your education, and subtly your emotions. If you cry too much, she recommends adjustments in your schedule. If you laugh too loudly, she reminds you that a future queen must express joy with restraint. In private, she's softer, but the moment a footman walks by, she straightens and becomes the human embodiment of Versailles etiquette. You learn from her how to wear a mask long before you ever need to. And then, of course, there's the clothing. Oh, the clothing. You don't get to dress for comfort, only symbolism. Each morning, dressing is a full ritual. It takes several attendants to get you ready. First come the undergarments, soft linen chemises, layers of petticoats. Then the corset, yes, even at this age, and it's gently tightened, not for your shape, but for posture. Posture, you're told, is the backbone of grace. Then comes the gown, with its embroidery more expensive than a farmer's annual wages, and the shoes, tiny, heeled, and always uncomfortable. By the time you're 4, you're a fashion statement, walking couture. You sit still for hours during fittings, with pins poking you and women arguing over whether lace from Lyon is superior to the imported kind. You have toys, but not the sort of toys other children have. No rag dolls or mud pies. Your dolls wear silks finer than most nobles, and they come with miniatures of your own wardrobe. You own a golden rocking horse, a clockwork bird that sings when you turn a key, a child-sized carriage pulled by the miniature ponies. All gifts, all tokens of royal attention, and none of them truly yours. Everything is documented, counted, treasured by others on your behalf. Even the toys serve a purpose, they reflect your station. But despite all this, you sometimes get away with being a child. When no one's looking, you and your siblings play tag in the corridors, giggling so hard it echoes off the marble. You race through the hedges of the royal gardens and hide in oversized urns. Sometimes you sneak a sweet from the kitchen, an eclair or a marzipan fruit, and eat it behind a column like it's a conspiracy. Your brother, Louis-Joseph, is delicate but mischievous. He'll tug your curls just to see you squeal, and you retaliate by hiding his lesson books. You fight, you pout, you make up again. Royal blood doesn't stop sibling nonsense. Your mother occasionally joins in. Marie Antoinette, cared, beneath the powdered wigs and diamond tiaras, is surprisingly fun. She tickles you. She hides behind doors to jump out and startle you. She lets you ride in her lap during carriage rides, even when it's inappropriate. To the court, she's scandalous. To you, she's just mama. She reads you bedtime stories in a lilting Austrian accent and sings lullabies she remembers from her own childhood. When you're sick, she holds your hand and doesn't let go, even if it means ignoring a banquet or ball. Those are the moments that feel real, the only ones that don't smell like rosewater and politics. Still, you notice things. how the adults' smiles tighten when certain names are mentioned, how your father becomes quieter each year, retreating into his locked study more often, how your mother laughs too loudly sometimes, like she's trying to cover something up. Even at 5, you're learning to read the room in ways most adults can't. You're constantly decoding who's loyal, who's pretending, who's dangerous. One time you overhear 2 nobles arguing about taxes. One of them mentions the starving people. You ask innocently, why don't they eat cake? And oh, what a moment that becomes. A careless echo later twisted into myth, tied to your mother's legacy forever. Of course she didn't say it, but someone heard you ask it, and myths need seeds, even tiny ones. There's a quirky moment around this time that history doesn't record in detail, but it lingers in oral accounts. One of the royal pet monkeys gets loose during a garden party and climbs up your dress. You scream naturally, and your brother laughs so hard he falls into a decorative fountain. The nobles are horrified. The queen just laughs with you, calling it a gift of chaos. It's one of those brief moments where the ridiculousness of Versailles becomes hilarious instead of oppressive. But it's also revealing how closely absurdity and danger walk together in your world. You're also starting lessons. Not just reading and writing, but fencing, dancing, Latin, geography, theology. Your tutor is dry as parchment, but he knows every royal precedent from Charlemagne to the present. You learn by recitation, like a well-trained parrot. What you don't say matters as much as what you do. You're taught diplomacy with wooden spoons and social hierarchy through seating arrangements. You don't sit next to someone because you like them. You do it because they're a duke, and the duke outranks a count. Simple, in theory. Scholars debate how intelligent you truly were, because your childhood documents are contradictory. Some say you were sharp, emotionally perceptive, possibly even cunning. Others suggest you were naive, a pampered innocent caught in history's jaws. But again, truth lies somewhere in between. You're smart enough to know you're watched. You're still too young to know by whom. At night, you lie awake in your enormous bed, staring at a ceiling painted to resemble the night sky, complete with glowing stars made from crushed pearl and beeswax. You wonder what real stars look like, if they twinkle differently for people who aren't royals, if children who sleep on straw mattresses dream the same way you do. Because even now, at this early stage, there's a part of you that suspects you're not like other children, and that difference might not save you, it might doom you. You're 6, maybe 7, and today your schedule is packed, because nothing says childhood like a full political calendar. You start your morning with an etiquette review, followed by embroidery practice, yes, boys too, then a short lecture on the history of the Carolingian dynasty. After that, it's a garden stroll with the Duke d'Harcourt's children, who you're supposed to befriend even though they smell faintly of mothballs and self-importance. These aren't friends in the way other kids have them, these are alliances in training. Every name, every handshake, every playdate is engineered with a long game in mind. Your cousin, twice removed yet still closer than most, accidentally lets slip that his father thinks the Queen is too foreign and too spendy. You don't understand the full implications, but you feel the tension twist your stomach like a knotted ribbon. Even your games of tag have political undertones. If you run too far from the appointed play area, someone whispers. If you pick the wrong partner during a game of royal charades, eyebrows rise. Everything at Versailles is a symbol, and you're fast becoming fluent in its code. No one explains it outright. You just absorb it. Still, play is play, and your young body still knows how to run. When you do manage to steal a few moments away from prying eyes, you and your brother Louis Charles hide in the hedgerows, pretending you're pirates or dragons or rebels, though you don't know what rebels are yet. He's younger than you, but bold in a wild, spark-eyed kind of way. The two of you form your own language, your own codes. Sometimes you speak in whispers under the table at formal dinners. Sometimes you pass drawings back and forth during mass, tiny sketches of fat nobles with balloon heads. You always giggle, even though you know your governess is watching from the corner, with the fixed smile of someone already composing her report. And then there are the adults' games, the ones you're dragged into without knowing. You're introduced to diplomats who crouch to your eye level and smile like you're a cake they'd like a slice of. They ask you simple questions, your favourite animal, your favourite book, but their ears are tuned for other signals. Your answers get reported. Everything gets reported. Once, when you say your favourite colour is red, it shows up in a foreign pamphlet 2 weeks later. The Queen's daughter prefers red blood colour. Coincidence? Suddenly you're not just playing, you're being played. Your mother senses it and sometimes tries to pull you back. She hosts small, private tea parties for you and your closest friends, children of nobles she trusts, which admittedly is a shrinking list. At these gatherings, things feel looser. The food is simpler: raspberry tarts, warm cream, tiny sandwiches with no political affiliations. You sit in a circle, laugh freely, and listen to your mother tell stories about Vienna, about snow, about how she once slid down a marble staircase in her petticoat just to make her sisters laugh. In these moments, you see the girl she once was, and she sees something in you too, maybe herself. There's a peculiar detail from this phase of your life that historians often overlook. During one particularly lavish masked ball, held in the Winter Garden Room of Versailles, a firework display goes off prematurely and sends a flaming cluster of sparkles into the guests. Chaos ensues, silk scorched, wig smouldering. You, dressed as a tiny Greek goddess, are swiftly scooped up and whisked to safety. Afterward, you laugh about it, calling it the night the stars attacked. But the Queen doesn't laugh. She holds you close and doesn't let go for hours, whispering in Austrian, too fast for your tutors to translate. At this age, you're also assigned a more formal role: representational appearances. That means being trotted out like a jewel in the crown at ceremonies, processions, and mass. You learn how to wave, not too eagerly, not too slowly. You kneel with your hands folded just so. You smile like you mean it, even when your new shoes are slicing into your heels. Sometimes you're allowed to speak publicly, simple greetings, little rehearsed lines, but they're weighted like lead. One wrong word and the political rumour mill churns out a dozen fresh conspiracies by breakfast. Your brother, Louis-Joseph, the Dauphin, is feeling it too. He's older than Louis-Charles, weaker in health, but treated like a demigod in miniature. He's being groomed hard, more tutors, more pressure, more rehearsals for a throne that doesn't know it's doomed. You see him fading little by little under the weight of expectation. He coughs often now, and each time he does, someone turns away and bites their lip. No one says the word sick, but it's there, hovering like incense smoke. There's one afternoon, quiet, unscheduled, when the Queen takes the three of you into her private salon and lets you pick your favourite song for the court musicians to play. You choose a silly little dance tune from the countryside. Your brothers jump up and spin in circles. You clap along, hair loosened, shoes discarded. The Queen laughs and joins in, her skirts swishing, her face pink from exertion. The musicians watch, stunned. It's the first time they've ever seen her look like a person. And for a moment, you forget about Versailles, about France, or about the fact that outside the gates the people are hungry and angry and sharpening their metaphors. Historians still debate the intent behind these humanizing moments. Some think Marie Antoinette staged them to soften her public image, a kind of carefully curated domesticity. Others believe they were sincere, desperate attempts to carve out a small human life within the fortress of power. For you, it's simpler. You don't know about propaganda. You just know your mother's laughter feels like sunlight through stained glass. But then the curtain always falls, the music fades. You're ushered out of the room. Your clothes are changed. A new guest is waiting. A new role must be played. You transform again from child to icon. At night, your dreams start to darken. You dream of being on stage in an empty theatre, where faceless people clap endlessly while you forget your lines. You dream of mirrors that show other versions of yourself, one smiling, one crying, one completely still. You wake in satin sheets under a canopy of silk roses, unsure if the applause is still echoing or just in your head. Because by now you understand something essential. Being royalty means being watched. Being watched means being judged. And being judged means one day you'll be punished for things you never chose. The Queen's chambers smell like rose oil, parchment, and powdered sugar, and this morning you're curled up beside her as she reads letters from Vienna aloud in that gentle, amused tone she saves just for you. It's one of those rare, quiet mornings where she isn't being pulled in 10 directions by protocol, scandal, or fashion decisions. She rubs your back absent-mindedly, her fingers tracing slow circles as she talks about her sister Maria Carolina's latest baby and how cold the winters are in Austria. You imagine snow piled against the palace walls, crisp and clean and 1,000 miles from this perfumed oven of Versailles. It's the closest thing to maternal peace you've felt all week. You love these moments, though they're getting fewer. As you grow older, the queen is more distracted, more distant. The court is restless, and so is she. Gossip pours through the halls like spilled wine, staining everything. They call her Madame Deficit now. You don't understand the economics, but you hear the bite in the nickname. The courtiers whisper louder when she enters the room. Even some of the guards, once blank-eyed and silent, now exchange glances when she walks past. She notices, she laughs louder, dresses brighter, hosts more parties. You're too young to see the desperation underneath it, but you feel the cold draft that always seems to follow her now. Still, in private she's mama, and she tries, she really truly tries. She dresses you herself sometimes, fumbling with ribbons and buttons because her hands aren't used to such practical work. She strokes your hair while you cry, even when she doesn't know why you're crying. She sneaks sweets into your pockets and winks like it's the world's greatest secret. Once, when you had a fever, she sat beside your bed all night, refusing to sleep until you were better. It was the only time you saw her cry without hiding it. Your relationship with her is complicated by the fact that she's not just your mother. She's the queen. Every hug is watched, every lullaby potentially analysed for political undertones. And no matter how many bedtime stories she reads you, someone's always waiting outside the door to remind her of her real responsibilities. There's a moment one summer when you sit beside her at her little farm village at the Petit Trianon. She built it for herself, a pastoral playground designed to mimic country life without any of the grime or desperation. There are goats with blue ribbons, milkmaids in embroidered aprons, and a vegetable garden no one dares actually harvest from. You love it there. It feels quiet, pretend but peaceful. You feed the chickens while she laughs in the sun. For an afternoon she's just a woman, you're just her child, and the world doesn't feel quite so dangerous. But danger is creeping in, even here. You overhear one of the servants muttering about a crowd forming in Paris. You're told to go back to your embroidery lesson, but your ears catch words like uprising, debt, and execution. You don't know what they mean yet. They just sound sharp. Your father is quieter than usual. He doesn't laugh at your jokes anymore. He barely looks up from his maps and lock mechanisms. When he does speak to you, it's kind but distant, like he's thinking of something far away, and you're just a flicker on the edge of it. He spends hours in his workshop, avoiding meetings, avoiding noise. You wonder if he's trying to disappear, or maybe disappear you from all this. Louis-Joseph, your older brother, is fading fast. He's been coughing more, deep hollow sounds that rattle the walls. The physicians come and go, bringing leeches, tinctures, and solemn expressions. The adults try to hide it from you, but you're not blind. You see how pale he's getting, how the nurses speak in hushed tones now. You once asked him if he thought he'd be king someday. He smiled weakly and said, "Maybe you will." You didn't know what to say to that. You still don't. And Louis Charles, your younger brother, is becoming the new focus. He's all energy and light and chaos, always underfoot, always demanding attention. The queen dotes on him, perhaps a little too obviously. You start to feel a shift, subtle but steady. You're still loved, but he's being prepared. A spare becoming the heir. A change in the constellation of your family, one that no one names, but everyone senses. There's an odd moment, one night during a thunderstorm, when you crawl into your mother's bed after a particularly loud clap of thunder shakes the window panes. She lets you curl against her, but she's already awake, her eyes red from crying. You ask what's wrong. She says, "France is sick, my love." You don't understand. You ask if it can get better. She doesn't answer. That line sticks with you for years. France is sick. You start looking for signs of it everywhere. The servants speaking in clipped tones, the guards doubling at the gates, the pamphlets that occasionally blow through the palace gardens, thrown over the wall by someone unseen, filled with monstrous cartoons of your mother wearing a crown of skulls. You don't understand the words, but you understand the hate drawn into every sharp line. You're old enough to recognise a threat when you see one. One day, during an awkward state visit, you're made to stand beside your mother, while she accepts an offering of flowers from a group of schoolgirls. You smile, you curtsy, then one of the girls, small, quiet, no older than you, looks up at the queen with a face full of unblinking hatred. The queen doesn't react, but you feel her grip on your hand tighten. That night, you don't sleep. You realise that even children can be enemies now. There's a fringe theory among some historians that around this time, Marie Antoinette considered sending you and your brothers out of France to Austria or Belgium or even England for safety. No official records confirm it, but a few letters hint at it. If it were true, it means she was already thinking about the end, about what would happen if they came for her, and whether her children could be spared. It means that even when she kissed your forehead and said everything would be all right, she may have already known it wouldn't. By now, your dreams have changed. You no longer dream of applause and mirrors. You dream of faceless mobs, of locked doors, of running barefoot through the palace with your siblings calling your name behind you. You wake up breathless, alone, and the painted angels on your bedroom ceiling no longer feel protective. They feel like watchers, like ghosts. You cling harder to your mother, and she to you. But even you, still a child, can feel her slipping, not just from you, but from power, from safety, from the fantasy of Versailles. The gowns are still elaborate, the ball's still held, but the music sounds wrong now, like it's playing over a storm you can't yet see but know is coming. Your father smells like ink, candle wax, and the faint tang of iron filings. Most days you find him hunched over in his private study, eyes half-lidded with concentration as he turns a tiny brass key in a lock no larger than a fingernail. He mutters softly to himself, winding gears and testing the weight of latches, lost in a world that makes sense to him, small, ordered, mechanical. You don't disturb him often, but when you do, he always turns to you with a slow, tired smile, like you've pulled him back from a deep tunnel. You love him, but he's a distant kind of warmth, like heat from a sunbeam on a cold day. When he picks you up, it feels like he's remembering what he's supposed to do. Louis XVI is a quiet man in a loud world. He wasn't made for the spotlight, for revolutions, for chaos. He was made for fixing clocks, for writing letters with careful penmanship, for living a life where he could tinker in peace. But fate didn't offer him that. Instead, it handed him a country with a collapsing economy, a restless people, and a wife whose popularity was unravelling by the day. So he escapes where he can, into tools and keys and cabinets, and occasionally into your company. One afternoon he calls you over to show you a mechanical bird he's built himself. It flutters its tiny wings and chirps when you wind it. You laugh delighted, and he beams. You see, he says, if only people were this easy to fix. You don't quite understand the meaning, but the way he says it makes your heart ache a little. You nod like you do, because sometimes a nod is kinder than a question. He tries to be a good father in his way. He insists on overseeing your education, not just reading and writing, but maps, logic, languages, and yes, practical skills. He wants you to know how the world works. Once, during a lesson, he brings out a globe and shows you how France sits at the centre of everything. You spin it slowly, your fingers brushing over oceans and foreign lands. All of this, he says, depends on us. And you believe him, at least in that moment. Your younger brother, Louis Charles, climbs into his lap often, even during meetings. The king doesn't mind, in fact, he seems to enjoy the interruption. Your mother scolds him for allowing such informality, but he just shrugs. What's the point of power if you can't hold your own child, he says. You remember that line? It feels simple, true, but again, too simple for the world he's trapped in. The court doesn't quite know what to make of your father. He's not charming. He doesn't give speeches that stir the blood. He doesn't flirt or flatter. He's polite to the point of awkwardness. He walks with the slight stoop of someone who would rather not be seen, which is unfortunate when you're literally the centre of a kingdom's gaze. People expect their king to be theatrical, commanding, magnetic. Louis XVI is none of those things. He's methodical, sincere, and deeply overwhelmed. And yet there's something comforting in his presence. He's solid, predictable. When he takes your hand during formal dinners, you feel steadier. When he walks with you in the garden, pointing out the names of herbs or explaining why the moon looks different in each phase, you feel like you're learning something sure, something permanent. It's a quiet magic, not the kind people sing songs about, but the kind you remember years later, in moments of fear. There's a strange little-known fact from this time that some royal records mention in passing. Your father once tried to teach you how to pick a lock. Yes, truly. He thought it would teach you patience and precision. In the privacy of his study, he showed you how to feel for the tension, how to coax the pins into place with the right pressure. Even the tightest lock yields to the right touch of, he told you. You weren't very good at it, but you remember the joy in his eyes when you tried. He treated you like an apprentice, not a princess, and that meant something. but these lessons in logic and locksmithing can't shield him from the rising tide. Outside Versailles, people are shouting louder. Pamphlets are turning venomous. The court is buzzing with unease. You don't yet understand the mechanics of political failure, but you can sense it. Your father's shoulders sag a little more each day. His eyes dart more quickly. He spends longer alone. You catch him once, just standing in a corridor, staring at nothing, completely still. When you call his name, he startles like he's been woken from a nightmare. He tries to prepare you for the world, but you can tell he doesn't know how. How could he? He's still figuring it out himself. He speaks of duty, of history, of honour, but his voice falters sometimes, as if he's no longer sure that those words hold weight. You're supposed to inherit the world, and yet the world is shifting beneath your feet like sand. Scholars argue endlessly over Louis XVI's competence. Was he a well-meaning man crushed by circumstance? Or a leader too slow and soft to rise to the moment? There's no simple answer, but from where you sit on the floor of his study watching him gently repair a broken watch, it's clear he was never built for thrones. He was built for smaller, quieter things, the ticking of gears, the neatness of order, the safety of routine. And you're a child still trying to make sense of the chaos wrapped in velvet. You adore your father even as you begin to see his limitations. You love his quiet strength even as you realize it may not be enough to protect you. You love the sound of his voice when he reads to you slowly, carefully, like every word is a promise. But promises, you're starting to learn, don't always come true. One evening, as the sky darkens and the lamps are lit with trembling flames, he takes you onto the balcony. You look out over the palace gardens where everything seems calm. Fountains glinting, hedges trimmed to perfection. "This won't last," he says softly. You look up at him. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. You know now that he's not just talking about the gardens. He's talking about all of it. So you nod, the way he taught you to when words won't help, and you remember the sound of ticking clocks and the weight of golden keys. Because even if the world outside is about to fall apart, for now, you still have this. A father's hand in yours, and a moment of silence between the storms. The moment they call you the Dauphin's sister, everything changes. The air in your lungs weighs differently. People begin to bow to you a little lower, speak a little more carefully, and offer smiles stretched too tightly across their faces. Louis-Joseph has died, and although the palace corridors remain polished and composed, grief seeps into everything like a slow, invisible flood. You're still a child, but you know death now. You've held your brother's hand as it grew cold. You've watched your mother crumple in a way no corset could straighten. You've seen your father cry, just once, his back turned to you, shoulders shaking silently in the window's reflection. The funeral is grand, of course, velvet drapes, black gowns, solemn priests with eyes like whetstones. You're dressed in mourning clothes, too small and too stiff, and your hair is braided so tightly it stings your scalp. But your tears are real. You don't cry for the pomp. You cry because your brother is gone, and with him, a part of your innocence. Now Louis Charles, younger than you by a few years, and wilder by several lifetimes, is the new Dauphin of France. You watch the shift happen in real time. Suddenly, he has his own guards, his own tutors, his own schedule, stuffed with Latin lessons and sword drills and uncomfortable dinners with advisors who pretend to laugh at his jokes. The same people who coddled you both now speak to him in clipped phrases like they're building a crown on his little head, word by word. You're proud of him. He's bright-eyed, quick-witted, and bold in a way that's sometimes infuriating and often admirable. But you're also jealous, not of the title, though it's undeniably heavy with power, but of the attention. The way your mother watches him now, the way your father leans in closer when he speaks. You begin to fade a little in the palace's gaze, shifting from central figure to elegant footnote. You're still important, still visible, but no longer the focus. Now you are the sister of the Dauphin, which is like being a moon to a new sun. And yet being a moon has its advantages. You see things the sun doesn't. You notice the new advisors circling your brother, like bees to nectar. You hear your governess whispering about letters intercepted from the provinces, about noble families fleeing the court. You feel the tension that builds each day, layered beneath the powdered beauty of the palace. Everything still gleams, but the smiles are tighter. The laughter too shrill. You're not supposed to know what's happening, but you do, and no one can take that away. There's one particular day strangely burned into your memory, when you're seated in the palace salon with your mother and Louis Charles. He's playing with a toy cannon, while the Queen sits rigidly with her embroidery hoop, her hands trembling just slightly as she stitches. Someone delivers a note. She opens it and freezes. She doesn't say a word, just folds it slowly and places it in her lap. You never learn what the note said, but after that she cancels all her appointments for the day and takes you both to the Petit Trianon. You pick strawberries. She doesn't smile once. The title of Dauphin brings more than responsibility. It brings risk. You see that now. Louis Charles is barely out of infancy, but already his face is printed on coins, sketched in newspapers, and invoked in speeches. He's spoken about like a messiah by some, a symbol of tyranny by others. It's a lot to carry, especially for someone who still sleeps with a stuffed lion named Gaspard. You try to shield him from it, shield both of you, but you're learning that the weight of the crown leaks into everything, like ink bleeding through paper. There's a little-known moment from this time that's as both charming and haunting. During a formal dinner, Louis Charles spills his wine all over the pristine white tablecloth embroidered with the royal crest. Everyone freezes. The musicians stop mid-note. The servants pale. But your mother, she laughs. A full, clear laugh that echoes against the chandeliers. She picks up her own goblet and tips it over, letting the red wine blossom beside his. See, she says, smiling at him, nothing lasts forever, not even perfection. The court laughs nervously, relieved, but you watch your mother's face afterward. Her eyes don't match her mouth. Scholars have debated endlessly about Louis Charles' temperament. Was he a spirited child full of charm and natural charisma? Or was he spoiled, coddled into fragility? The truth is, he was both. He could switch from giggling delight to royal tantrum in seconds. He adored attention, but hated responsibility. He wanted to play soldier, but cried when his boots pinched. You loved him dearly, but you also knew he wasn't ready for the weight they were starting to pile on his small shoulders. And in your own life, your role continues to evolve. You're not forgotten, not quite, but you're being edged toward the side. Marriage prospects are discussed openly now, even though you're barely 9. Names of foreign princes are tossed around like party favours, and you hear your mother argue with your father about your future. Austria, Spain, Naples. One suitor is apparently too Protestant, another too dim, and another too French. You're not consulted. You're a chess piece slid silently across the board by hands that speak in dynastic terms. And yet you find ways to hold on to yourself. You begin to write more in your journals, poems and observations and little sketches of people around you. You listen carefully during state dinners. You pay attention when no one thinks you are. There's power in being the moon, you realise. The sun may shine brighter, but you see the shadows. At night, you and Louis Charles sit by the window in your shared suite, watching the torches flicker in the gardens. You tell him stories, soft and strange, about princes who become paupers and queens who turn into swans. He listens with wide eyes, curled in a blanket that once belonged to your late brother. Sometimes you hold his hand, sometimes he falls asleep against your shoulder. You're not just his sister, you're his anchor. But even you can't stop the tide that's rolling in. Outside the walls of Versailles, France is waking up, angry, loud and hungry. You feel it like a vibration underfoot. You feel it when the guards whisper too loudly, when the horses in the royal stables pace nervously, when the Queen's letters arrive with slashes through the wax, like someone's trying to send a warning with every seal. So you hold your brother a little tighter, memorize your mother's laugh, watch your father turn keys in locks that can't keep the world out. Because even though you're just a child, you can sense it deep in your bones. The golden age is over, and the storm has already started. Your gowns are heavier now, not just the fabric, though they've certainly doubled in weight and embroidery, but the way they hang on your shoulders like obligations stitched in gold thread. You're older. Not quite a woman, not quite a child, just old enough to be watched with new eyes. They assess your posture, your ankle angles, the softness of your voice, the sharpness of your gaze. You're told to smile more. You're told to smile less. You're told you should begin preparing yourself for marriage, for motherhood, for sacrifice. No one asks what you want. Wanting things isn't part of the royal vocabulary. You exist to reflect light, not absorb it. Your sisterhood with Louis Charles becomes your only true sanctuary. He's growing into his title now, awkwardly, like a vine twisting around something it didn't choose. His tutors fill his days with maps and Latin phrases, royal etiquette and the lineage of kings stretching back to Clovis. He repeats them dutifully, but you can see the spark dimming in him. The games you used to play in the garden are fewer now. He doesn't laugh quite as much. His jokes come slower. He understands that he's not a little boy anymore. He's the Dauphin. And every time someone calls him that, he stiffens just slightly, as if the word is a weight being dropped onto his back. You try to shield him, in ways subtle and soft. You make up stories again, this time longer, more intricate, filled with secret kingdoms and magical queens who defy the odds. He listens in silence, wide-eyed, curled up beside you in bed. He asks questions. He wants to know what happens if the hero runs away, what happens if the kingdom doesn't want to be saved. And you don't always have answers. There's a strange new rhythm to palace life. The balls and feasts continue, but they feel thinner, like painted backdrops in a play you can't exit. The chandeliers still shine, the music still swells, but the sparkle is tired. You can tell people are performing joy. You've learned to spot the difference. The nobles arrive late and leave early. The musicians play softer, slower. Everyone seems to be waiting for something, but no one wants to name it. Your mother has grown sharper. Not colder exactly, but more precise. Her dresses are more severe. Her smile's more measured. She used to twirl through the palace like a breeze smelling of jasmine and mischief. Now she moves like a blade, controlled, swift, unforgiving. You've seen her yell at her advisors behind closed doors, furious, frustrated, fierce in a way you've never seen before. She hugs you afterward like she's afraid she won't have the chance again. You don't ask questions, you just let her. One day you find her in her dressing room staring into the mirror with a torn letter in her hands. Her maid curtsies and flees the moment she sees you enter. Your mother doesn't look away from the mirror. She simply says, "They've called me a monster. Again." You walk up beside her and take her hand. Her fingers are cold. She squeezes yours once and says nothing more. Somewhere in the palace, maybe in a drawer or an old painted box, you keep little scraps of your childhood. A ribbon from your favourite dress, a torn page from a book your governess confiscated, a drawing your brother made when he was 5, showing the two of you as stick figures standing in front of a very wobbly-looking palace. You look at them sometimes before bed, just to remind yourself that you were, once, just a child. But you're not allowed to be anymore. Your tutors have started preparing you for diplomacy. You're being taught how to speak clearly, but not too forcefully, how to enter a room, how to leave one, how to make small talk in 5 languages. You're given long lessons on geography, religion, and the structure of other European courts. You now know more about Prussian court manners than you do about how to braid your own hair. They're preparing you for marriage, of course, you don't know to whom yet. The names are still being passed back and forth like chess pieces. Ferdinand of Spain, Louis of Parma, Maximilian of Austria. Some are children you've met briefly, some are just portraits and stories. You wonder if any of them dream of running away too. There's one peculiar afternoon that sticks in your memory like a thorn. The Queen has gathered you, your brother, and a few other noble children for a performance. A private play. You're dressed as a shepherdess, your brother as a young king in a felt crown. The play is light-hearted, written to amuse, but there's a line in the final scene that catches in your throat. The crown is heavy, even in play. You deliver it with a small curtsy, and the adults clap, smiling. But your mother doesn't clap. She just watches, stone still. Afterward, she pulls you aside and says, "You must never say that line outside these walls." You nod, and you never do. Louis Charles has started to have nightmares. You wake to his cries, soft and panicked, as he calls out for your mother, for your father, for you. You climb into bed beside him and whisper that everything is fine, that nothing can hurt him here. But you don't believe it anymore. You hear the unrest echoing from Paris. You see the pamphlets passed from hand to hand in the servants' quarters. You've heard the servants themselves muttering, even daring to joke about the monarchy in your presence. They think you don't understand, but you do. There's a growing debate among historians about how much your family understood the real danger creeping toward you at this point. Some claim the royals were in denial, still lost in velvet curtains and powdered delusions. Others argue the Queen knew exactly what was coming, but was paralysed by the weight of protocol and pride. The truth? You think she knew, you think your father knew, you all knew. You just didn't know what to do about it. At night you pray, but not the way the priest taught you. You pray for time, for one more week, one more summer in the garden, one more morning with no guard stationed at your door. You pray without words mostly, just feelings, longings, and in the quietest hour before the sun rises, you sometimes ask yourself, What would I be without the crown? Would I still be me? Would anyone still love me? You don't have an answer yet, but you keep asking. The first time you hear someone whisper the word illness in the corridor, your stomach knots instinctively. Not the kind of gentle illness that keeps you in bed with broth and lullabies, but the sort that makes voices lower, eyes sharpen, and doors close more quickly than usual. It starts with your brother. Again, Louis Charles, the boy everyone's watching now. He's been coughing. Not a soft, ordinary cough, but a barking, chesty one that leaves him pale and breathless, clutching his sides like each inhale hurts. You sit beside his bed as the physician listens to his lungs and frowns so deeply you think the expression might be permanent. They say it's just a cold. Then it's not a cold, then it's respiratory weakness. And someone mentions the word consumption before being sharply hushed. You've heard it before. That's what took Louis Joseph. That's what thinned him to a ghost before he vanished altogether. You look at your younger brother and wonder how many more times you're going to be forced to watch the people you love wither in slow motion. But it's not just your brother this time. There's a sickness creeping through the palace that no doctor can diagnose. A sickness of the mind, of the spirit. The courtiers have started to vanish. One day they're at dinner laughing into their wine goblets. The next day they're indisposed. Some fall ill, some simply flee to the countryside under the pretense of headaches, bad air, or pressing family matters. You know what they're really fleeing from. You can practically smell the fear now, sharp and sour like overripe fruit. Inside the walls of Versailles, the golden glow is flickering. People are whispering more than they're speaking. Servants scurry like they're trying to outrun shadows. Rooms that once buzzed with music and gossip now sit empty, curtains drawn, the furniture covered in linen, like the palace itself is being tucked in for a long, uncertain sleep. And still they keep dressing you. They keep lacing up your gowns and curling your hair and placing rubies on your earlobes like it's going to change anything. You go to mass, curtsy at court, attend dance rehearsals where you practice moves meant for weddings that may never happen. It all feels like pantomime now, each step choreographed not for celebration but survival. The monarchy is pretending to still be whole. You're pretending not to notice it cracking. One morning you wake to find your favourite governess gone, just gone. Her quarters are cleaned out. Her perfume no longer lingers in the halls. No explanation is given. Another woman takes her place the next day, younger, sterner, with colder eyes. You ask what happened. She returned to her family, you're told. But you know she didn't. Not willingly, not without a goodbye. Your mother tries to keep things normal. She insists on family breakfasts. She brings fresh flowers to your rooms. She laughs too loudly at your brother's jokes, but her eyes are bloodshot from crying. You find crumpled letters in her wastebasket, covered in frantic handwriting. Once, you hear her muttering to herself as she stares into the fireplace. If we leave now. No, too late. You back away from the door before she sees you. There's a debate raging in every drawing room now, not just in Versailles, but in Paris, in pamphlets, in the people's homes. Some say the royal children are innocent and should be spared if the revolution comes. Others say you're symbols of corruption, tainted by blood and entitlement, and should suffer the same fate as your parents. You're 11, maybe 12, and already people you've never met are arguing over whether you deserve to live. The thought clings to you like a rash. Your brother starts sleeping with a candle burning beside his bed. He says it keeps the nightmares away. You believe him. You start doing the same. One day he gets a nosebleed during lessons. Nothing major, just a thin trickle. But you panic. The tutor rushes forward, dabbing at him with a lace cloth. Your mother arrives minutes later, pale and wild-eyed. She scoops him up and holds him in her lap like he's a baby again. You stand by, useless, watching. You feel like the air's been sucked from the room. The bleeding stops. He's fine. He laughs it off. But the Queen doesn't let him out of her sight for the rest of the day. That night, she sits at the edge of his bed and sings a lullaby so soft you can barely hear the words. There's a strange little detail from this period. The Queen starts carrying a small vial of lavender oil with her everywhere. She says it's to calm her nerves. You catch her uncorking it at least 10 times a day, breathing it in like it's air. Sometimes she presses it to her forehead. Once, you watch her put a few drops behind your brother's ears as he sleeps. To protect him, she whispers. You're not sure if she means from sickness or something worse. And there's something else. The physicians start coming more frequently, not just for Louis Charles, but for you. They examine your throat, your pulse, your fingernails. They ask if you've had trouble sleeping. You lie and say no. You don't want them to know that your dreams have turned from stories into storms, that you wake up gasping, that sometimes you swear you see your dead brother standing in the corner, just watching, saying nothing. The scholarly debate about whether these were mass psychosomatic symptoms or real afflictions is ongoing. Some think the stress and confinement simply made everyone sick. Others believe there was real physical illness, consumption, typhus, even arsenic poisoning whispered by the more conspiratorially inclined. But none of those theories matter to you. What matters is that your home no longer feels like home. It feels like a trap, one that tightens a little more each day. And yet you keep smiling, you attend your lessons, you play the harp at gatherings where no one really listens. You stand beside your brother as he's presented to the court as the hope of France. You curtsy, you say your rehearsed lines, you don't cry, because if sickness has infected the palace, you've learned one thing. It's not just in the lungs or the blood, it's in the silence. It's in the lies. It's in the way everyone keeps pretending that nothing is wrong when everything is. Breakfast is a ceremony now, not a meal. You sit at a long, polished table with a lace cloth so delicate it snags on your fingernails if you fidget. Silver dishes arrive under domed lids, carried by servants with blank faces and velvet gloves. You don't speak unless spoken to. You chew slowly. You smile when your mother smiles. You pretend the melon tastes sweet. The palace has become a theatre of control. Every meal, every bow, every breath, choreographed to project calm. But beneath the silver and silk, everyone is rattling like dry leaves in the wind. You're 13, maybe just on the cusp. Old enough to recognise that the palace is a house built of performance and fear. The air is too clean, the corridors too quiet, the laughter too sharp. Outside the gates, the people chant and march. Inside, your family clings to ritual like it's a raft in open water. Even your brother, once free-spirited and sun-eyed, has learned to nod solemnly and speak in rehearsed phrases when strangers visit. His eyes still dance when he looks at you, but he no longer runs. He walks. And the food is absurd. While Paris tightens its belt and counts every crumb, your breakfast includes spiced pears from Italy, eggs poached in cream, and bread braided into shapes that no one eats. You used to love these meals. Now they feel grotesque. You're not allowed to say so. Once, when you left your plate half finished, your tutor leaned in and whispered, "A true daughter of France does not waste what peasants would die for." You wanted to scream. Instead, you took another bite and stared straight ahead. Louis Charles isn't doing well. His cough has returned, and with it, a restless Cecil that makes him pace his room at night until he collapses. You hear his footsteps through the wall, soft, then frantic, then still. One night you slip into his room and find him curled beneath the window, clutching a crumpled drawing. It's the two of you, holding hands, standing beside a house that doesn't exist. "I want to go there," he says, "where it's quiet." You don't say that nowhere is quiet anymore. You just sit beside him and hold his hand. The king tries to maintain order. He still hosts council meetings, still writes long, careful notes in the margins of proposals no one will ever act on. But there's a hollowness to him now, as if his spirit has left the palace but forgotten to take his body with it. You rarely see him outside of dinner or chapel. When you do, he's hunched over, inspecting locks, or staring out of windows like he's counting seconds between disasters. Your mother still floats through the palace with powdered elegance, but she has stopped speaking Austrian aloud. Even in private, she fears the wrong ears. There's a moment that sticks with you, one of those strange little details that no one else notices, but brands itself into your memory. A servant brings a tray of oranges, and your brother reaches out for one. The servant flinches, just a twitch, just for a moment. But it's enough. You see it. Your brother sees it. And you both understand people don't fear the throne anymore. They fear the guillotine. The symbolism around you is dizzying. Everything has a meaning. The colours you wear, the music you hear, even the flowers in the palace garden are being watched now. Are they too decadent? Too royal? Too removed from the suffering outside? Your mother stops wearing diamonds in public. Your father stops hunting. Small concessions that feel like pebbles tossed into a flood. Your birthday comes and goes with barely a whisper. No ball this year, no formal celebration. Just a quiet breakfast, a few nervous gifts, and a card from your governess that reads, May your strength match your lineage. You don't know if it's meant as encouragement or a warning. There's a fringe rumour circulating among the nobility that the royal family is cursed. It starts as a joke, a wine-drenched whisper at a banquet, but spreads like mildew in a damp cellar. They say the ghosts of the Bastille haunt the Queen's chambers. They say the paintings in the Hall of Mirrors have started to weep. They say the royal bloodline has been tainted by pride, and the gods of revolution demand a sacrifice. It's absurd, of course, but the fact that people believe it, that they need to believe it, tells you more than the rumour itself. One afternoon you slip away from your chaperones and sneak into the kitchens. You're craving something real. Bread still warm, butter that hasn't been carved into shapes. The kitchen staff stares at you like you're an apparition. You ask for a heel of bread. The cook hesitates, then hands you a piece. It's rough, crusty, perfect. You sit on the stone steps outside the back door and eat it in silence. For 5 minutes you feel human. For 5 minutes you aren't a symbol or a scandal or a strategy. You're just hungry and full. That night you return to your room and draw the bread from memory. It's not very good. The shape is lopsided, but you keep the sketch anyway, tucked in the back of your journal like a prayer. The Queen calls you to her room more often now. She says it's to keep you company, but you know better. She's watching you, gauging you, preparing you. She asks how much Latin you remember, whether you can name the archdukes of the Holy Roman Empire, whether you would be afraid to speak to a room of strangers. If something were to happen to me, she begins one evening, and you stop her. Nothing will, you say. She smiles, but the smile is tired. Say that again, she whispers. So you do! Your dreams are strange lately. You dream of falling through marble floors, of staircases that collapse under your feet, of a crowd of faceless people pointing, yelling as your brother disappears behind a curtain you can't open. You wake sweating, praying, staring at the ceiling like it holds secrets. And every morning you pull yourself together, one stocking, one corset, one smile at a time. Because that's what you've learnt to do, to exist as ceremony, to endure as a statue in a storm, to become not just a person, but a presence. And while the city trembles and history sharpens its blade, you keep attending breakfast, you keep bowing at chapel, you keep pretending everything's fine even when the ground feels like it's shaking beneath your feet. Because what else can you do? You were born into this, and no one, not even a princess, gets to choose how the story begins. Somewhere between your 14th name day and the first cannon fire, the lessons stop. Not all at once, not with a dramatic announcement, just gradually, quietly, like the tide going out while you're looking the other way. The tutors come less often. The embroidery needles remain untouched in their velvet-lined box. Even the harp sits silent in the corner of your room, its strings collecting dust and forgotten music. The palace seems to have realised it's no longer preparing children for ballrooms and royal marriages. It's preparing them for survival. Your schedule, once packed tighter than a corset ribbon, becomes erratic. Some mornings you're summoned early for a perfunctory breakfast with the Queen, who now seems to live on strong coffee and determination. Other days you're left to your own devices, wandering empty hallways with echoes as your only company. The gilded ceilings and frescoed walls that once delighted you now feel oppressive, like too much frosting on a cake that no one wants to eat anymore. You find solace in places you were once discouraged from visiting, the dusty corners of the palace, forgotten corridors that smell of beeswax and damp stone. You slip away from your handlers and curl up in window alcoves where the light filters through layers of lace and smoke. You read banned books, trace cracks in the marble, watch the guards from behind the curtains, and wonder which ones might secretly want you dead. Louis Charles is changing too, and not in the sweet, innocent way of a child growing up. He's still small, but there's something older in his eyes now. Wary, quiet. His fits of laughter faded into sighs, his cough returns in waves, and with it, long spells of sleep that leave his face ashen, and his temper frayed. He resents the crown, though he never says it aloud. You can tell by the way he pulls at the neck of his tunic when court officials bow too low or repeat his name too often. Dauphin. It sounds like a dare now, not a title. There's a moment, brief, almost laughably small, that you carry like a pebble in your shoe. The two of you are sitting in the Queen's salon waiting for an ambassador to arrive. When he turns to you and whispers, "Do you think we'll ever be normal?" You ask what he means. He shrugs. Like, live in a house with no gold, just wood, eat bread and apples. Have a dog, maybe a goat. You smile. You want to say yes. Instead, you say, I think we could. That's as close to hope as you can get. The revolution isn't at your gates. It's inside them now. The whispers have turned to shouts. The pamphlets are no longer smuggled, they're delivered. There are guards who wear the tricolour cockade now, right alongside the bourbon fleur-de-lis. Your mother is furious about it. Your father is silent. You watch as the world you were promised dissolves like sugar in hot tea. Versailles itself is no longer safe. The decision is made, quietly, behind closed doors, to move the royal family to Paris. For your safety, they say. But you know better. You know what a cage looks like, even when it's gilded. You pack only what you're told. You're allowed 1 trunk, inside 4 dresses, 3 pairs of shoes, a Bible, and a locket with your brother's miniature painting sealed beneath glass. No dolls, no diaries, nothing heavy. The ride to Paris is strange, both too fast and too slow. Crowds line the roads, not in celebration, but in watchful silence. Some jeer. A few spit. The guards form a barrier, but it's more for show than protection. You hold your brother's hand the entire way, and neither of you speak. The Queen stares straight ahead. The King twitches his fingers on the window ledge like he's counting seconds between now and never. Your new home is the Tuileries Palace, an old, drafty monument that feels like a tomb someone forgot to bury. The rooms are colder, the ceilings lower, the windows smaller, the guards more numerous. There are no more balls, no more music, just long days of structured silence, occasional visitors with political agendas, and more time than anyone knows what to do with. You're still dressed like royalty, but there's no one left to be impressed by it. There's an odd historical fact buried in some memoirs from this time. Your meals begin to arrive on tin plates instead of silver. No one announces it. It just happens. You notice the change because your reflection, once so clear in your dinnerware, has vanished into dull grey metal. You don't say anything, you just eat more slowly. Your mother tries to hold things together. She still brushes your hair herself at night. She sings to your brother when his coughing keeps him awake. She writes letters in secret, with handwriting so small and tight it looks like spider legs on parchment. Once, you catch her tearing one into tiny pieces and swallowing them with water. So no one finds it, she says. You nod. You don't ask who she's writing to, or why she feels like she has to hide it inside herself. Your father, strangely, becomes more relaxed. Not joyful exactly, but less stiff. He begins spending more time with you, reading aloud from books, asking about your lessons, fixing broken toys. Maybe he's relieved that the pretending is over. Maybe he's retreating into the only place he's ever felt safe, his family. It's bittersweet. You love this version of him, this quiet man with calloused hands and sad eyes. But you know this version only exists because everything else has been taken from him. And yet even here, in this stripped-down palace under watch, they try to make you perform. You're brought out for appearances, forced to smile, to greet officials who sneer behind their words. You begin to hear your name in public again, but it's no longer followed by applause, it's followed by arguments, accusations, spoiled a brat, puppet queen, daughter of tyranny. You've become a symbol again, only now for the wrong side of history. Some historians argue that this period marked the beginning of your psychological shift, that the pressure, the confinement, the shame twisted your development in permanent ways. Others insist you remained hopeful, resilient, clinging to grace even in the worst conditions. The truth is more complicated. You learn to smile without feeling, to nod without agreeing, to cry only when no one's looking. You survive by becoming quiet, still, watchful. You and Louis Charles share a room now. It's small with a single window overlooking a courtyard of cracked stones and moss. You take turns telling stories at night. You whisper games into the darkness. Sometimes you fall asleep holding hands, as if you're afraid one of you might disappear while the other dreams. And maybe you are, because already things are being taken from you. Titles, friends, freedoms, childhood. But not your voice, not yet. At first you think the noise outside is just thunder, distant, low, unthreatening. But then it swells, voices, drums, the scrape of metal. You press your hand to the window pane and see them, people, not a crowd, not a mob, the people. Dirty, determined, shouting names like yours through gritted teeth. Your brother stands behind you, barefoot, one arm clutching your nightdress. Are they here for us? He asks. You don't know how to answer. You just nod slowly and whisper, not yet. That morning, everything changes. You're woken earlier than usual, not by your governess or your maid, but by a guard. His voice is clipped and urgent. You must dress, now. There's no explanation, just the low thrum of dread hanging in the air. Your mother appears moments later, her hair loose, a robe pulled hastily around her nightgown. She looks smaller somehow, unpowdered, human. Close to me, she says, and you do. You're ushered through narrow corridors, past guards who no longer salute. Some won't even meet your eyes. In the grand entry hall, the king stands in full regalia. Not because he wants to, but because someone told him it would look better. You can tell he's barely holding it together. His lip trembles, his hands twitch. Your mother, always composed, grips her rosary so tightly the beads press marks into her palms. You're told the people have arrived, not at the gates, inside them, armed, furious, demanding bread, justice, and your heads, though not necessarily in that order. You're moved to an inner chamber, thick doors, no windows, barely enough air. The queen paces, the king prays. Louis Charles clings to you like a shadow. No one speaks above a whisper. You are no longer royalty. You are hostages. From beyond the walls you hear chants. Down with the tyrants, liberty or death. Let them bleed. The voices are many, tangled together like vines. And yet you can pick out words like your name and your mother's, your brother's. It doesn't feel real. It feels like a play. You expect someone to call cut, but no one does. One of the guards comes back, breathless. They want to see the children. The room freezes. Your father stammers. Your mother says no, but someone else, an advisor you barely recognize, says it's the only way to calm the crowd. Let them see the innocence, he says. Let them see the future of France. You're pushed forward before you have a chance to burst. They dress you quickly, clumsily. You wear a muslin gown, simple and creased, a far cry from the silks of Versailles. Louis Charles is given a velvet coat several sizes too big. He sways under its weight. Your mother straightens your posture. Your father adjusts your ribbon. There's a silence between you all, heavy, stretched. Then the doors open. The hall is packed, hot, airless. Bodies pressed together like livestock, eyes narrowed, mouths thin. These aren't the people who once threw flowers at your carriage. These are the ones who've starved, who've buried children, who've sharpened blades and held grudges and read every filthy pamphlet about your family's sins. And now they've come to see the little royals themselves. You step forward, holding your brother's hand. You curtsy. He bows. There's a flicker of surprise in the crowd. You look human to them. Maybe for the first time. You're not paintings. You're not monsters. You're two scared children blinking in the heat and sweat of revolution. Someone hurls a tomato. It misses. A few people clap. Others hiss. But they don't surge forward. They don't drag you off stage. That somehow is considered a victory. Back in your chamber, your mother cries, quietly but openly. You've only seen her cry 3 times. When Louis-Joseph died, when you were sick with fever as a toddler, and now. They want blood, she says, but they might settle for tears. You don't know what to say, so you just sit beside her and take her hand. That night, the Queen doesn't sleep, neither do you. You lie awake listening to the crowd outside, and their chants grow softer with the moon, but never vanish entirely. You imagine them circling the palace like wolves. You imagine them climbing through the windows, faces smeared with soot and grief. You imagine what they would do to you if you weren't protected by doors and prayers. And then you remember you aren't protected. Not really. The guards are loyal but scared. The officials are scattered. The public has turned. Your world is made of glass, and the stones are already flying. There's a strange historical account, often dismissed as apocryphal, that says one of the revolutionaries approached you after that audience and knelt. Not in reverence, but curiosity. He asked if you understood why they hated your family. You nodded. Then he asked if you hated him. No, you supposedly said, but I'm afraid of what you're going to do. Whether or not it happened, the story sticks, because it feels true. In the following days, the palace becomes less of a home and more of a waiting room. You're allowed limited access to the gardens. Always supervised, always silent. Your meals are plain, your letters are read, your belongings are searched. Guards come and go. One is replaced mid-shift for smiling at you too kindly. Another scowls so deeply when you pass, your brother asks if he's cursed. You begin to write secretly, on scraps, on the backs of old lessons. You keep the pages under your mattress, folded so tightly the ink smudges. You don't write prayers or poems anymore. You write questions. Will I survive this? Will he? Will she? Where is Versailles? What happened to the stars on the ceiling? What did we do that was so wrong? One afternoon you spot the Queen talking to a young soldier in the courtyard, her voice low, her hands clenched. Later you find a map hidden inside a book in her room. Escape. You don't ask. But now, when she kisses your forehead at night, she lingers, and you understand why. Scholars will argue for centuries about when the monarchy truly fell, when the Bastille was stormed, when the people marched, when the guards changed sides. But you know the truth. It wasn't any one moment. It was the quiet realization that you were no longer safe, that your title meant nothing to the people calling your name through the bars, that being royal didn't protect you, it condemned you. And now, with the people at your doorstep and your family unravelling by the hour, you begin to do what you've never been taught. You begin to plan how to survive. The days bleed together in the Tuileries, each one shaped by routine but hollow at its core. Breakfast, prayers, a walk in the courtyard, lessons delivered more as distraction than instruction, and then hours of waiting. Waiting for what no one will say out loud. But you feel it. It hums beneath your skin, like a draft through a cracked window. It's always there. Uncertainty, tension, dread. Your brother asks often now, "When will we go home?" You tell him soon, even though you know Versailles is gone, not just physically, emotionally. It has become a myth, a distant planet, unreachable and unreal. The palace that was once your stage has become your prison, and you walk its halls like a ghost. The mirrors are smaller here, the rooms darker, the ceilings lower, as though even the architecture no longer believes in the divine right of kings. You miss the way Versailles smelled, lavender and beeswax and sunlight on gold leaf. Here everything smells faintly of dust, mildew and old paper. It's a place built for politics, not family. And now, with the court gone and the people watching, it doesn't feel like either. Your parents are doing their best to pretend nothing is ending. Your father reads aloud from moral texts at dinner, trying to keep some version of the Enlightenment alive. Your mother knits. She knits obsessively. She's not making anything specific, just long rows of stitches, as if the rhythm might hold her sanity in place. She looks up from her yarn only when someone speaks to her. And even then her eyes take a second to catch up. The guards are no longer courtly. They address your family without titles. Monsieur Capet, they call your father. Madame Capet, your mother. The names sting like slaps. They are not who you are. They are not who you were. But it's how they speak now, like you're already forgotten. And then one morning it begins. A new noise from the streets. Not the usual roar of angry chants or scattered cries, but something rhythmic, loud, organised. Footsteps, marching, hundreds of them. You climb up on the window bench and see a long river of bodies snaking through the streets of Paris, all heading in one direction toward the palace. You are told to stay away from the windows, but you don't. You watch them come. People from every corner of France holding banners, carrying pikes and signs and flags. Some of them are women with babies strapped to their backs. Some are men with hands like bricks. Their faces are not full of rage this time. They are set with something deeper. Resolve. They have come not to demand, but to decide. Later that day, the king receives an ultimatum. You don't hear the conversation, but you hear your mother yelling afterward. And that night, while your brother sleeps, you press your ear to the wall and listen to them argue. "We can't just go," she says. "We stay and we die," your father replies. "They'll never let us leave." And they don't. The next morning, the guards escort your entire family into the central salon. You're told to dress plainly. No ribbons, no silk. You wear muslin again. Your shoes are scuffed. Your brother's coat sleeves are too short. Your parents look like they've aged 10 years overnight. This isn't a royal appearance. It's a removal. A carriage awaits in the courtyard. It's unadorned, narrow, not built for royalty. And when you step into it, you realise that you've never ridden in anything that didn't gleam. There are bars on the windows. A soldier rides beside the driver, his musket visible in the morning light. You sit pressed between your mother and your brother, hands clasped, knees touching. Your father sits across from you holding a small leather book. He doesn't open it, he just holds it. The ride through Paris is slow and brutal. The streets are lined with people, not cheering, not mourning, just watching, as if waiting to see whether you'll crumble or scream. You do neither. You sit perfectly still. It's the only power you have left. Your mother murmurs prayers under her breath. Your father stares at the floor. Louis Charles clings to your arm like he might float away otherwise. Some of the crowd throw stones. Someone spits. You flinch but do not react. You are no longer Marie-Thérèse the princess. You are a public image in motion. A royal procession turned funeral parade. You remember the first time you rode through Paris, years ago, with rose petals falling from the sky? This time it's dirt, and insults, and silence. Your new destination is the temple, a medieval fortress repurposed into a prison. When you arrive, its doors groan open like the mouth of some great beast, and you feel it swallow you whole. The air is damp and metallic. The walls are thick, not for protection, but containment. You're led up a narrow stairwell to a cramped apartment with sparse furniture and a single window that barely opens. This is your new home. There is no ceremony, no welcome, just keys turning behind you and the realization that your world has ended with a dull final click. From this point on, the outside world becomes myth again. You hear rumours through the guards about riots, trials, executions, but nothing certain. You don't know who's alive or dead, who has escaped or been dragged to the scaffold. You're 13 and your life has shrunk to a few rooms, a few hours of sunlight, and the company of a family unravelling quietly in real time. And yet even here, your mother tries to maintain a sense of normalcy. She insists on lessons. She makes you write in your journal every day. She forces your brother to recite verses, even when his voice is hoarse and his hands are shaking. We are still ourselves, she says. We don't stop being who we are because the world forgets. There's a peculiar detail about the temple that's often left out of the textbooks. The Queen began brushing your hair every night again, like when you were little. No matter how tired she was, no matter how bleak the day, she would sit you down, untangle the knots and hum softly to herself. The song changed depending on her mood. Sometimes it was a lullaby, sometimes a sad waltz, sometimes nothing at all. Just silence and the sound of bristles on tired hair. And each night as the locks turned and the guards changed shift, you would lie in the dark and listen to your brother breathe beside you, too fast, too shallow, and you would tell yourself, we are still here, we are still here, we are still here. But deep down, you know, you're not meant to be here long. The escape plan is whispered into your life like a bedtime story told too close to your ear. One night the Queen presses a folded scrap of paper into your hand, while your brother sleeps beside you, curled into a tight, exhausted ball. Don't read it now, she says. Her voice is barely a breath. Just keep it close. You tuck it into your stocking. You lie back against the stiff linen pillow. You stare at the ceiling and you understand the time has come. It's not the first time escape has been discussed, but this time it feels real. Concrete. Names, dates, a route drawn on the back of a discarded menu from one of your father's state dinners. The irony isn't lost on you. This was once a palace where people spent hours choosing between duck and venison. Now that same scrap of parchment is the key to your freedom. Preparations begin in pieces. New clothes arrive, dull and common. Nothing sparkles, nothing fits perfectly. You're told to wear layers, to keep your head down, to speak only when asked. Your father practices his role. He'll be Monsieur Durand, a valet accompanying a Russian noblewoman and her children travelling under forged documents. Your mother's alias is more elaborate. The air outside smells like rust and rain. You step into the alley. The carriage is waiting. You climb in. Your mother wraps her shawl tighter. Your father nods to the driver. The horses twitch. And then you begin to move. The first few streets are empty. You glance out the window. Dark houses, shuttered doors, gas lamps glowing like tired stars. You feel your chest tighten with every turn, waiting for the shout, the shot, the hand to reach in and drag you out. You pass through a checkpoint. A soldier glances into the carriage. Your father speaks. The forged papers are offered. The soldier nods. You continue. Another checkpoint. Another pause. This time the soldier is slower. His eyes linger on your mother's face. Recognition flickers. He hesitates. And then the delay stretches too long. He walks away. A few minutes pass. Then a group of guards appears on horseback. Someone shouts. Someone else runs. You hear the words, "Stop this carriage." Everything turns to chaos. The horses rear. The carriage jolts. A musket is raised. Your father tries to open the door. Your mother screams. Your brother is crying now openly, violently. You grab his hand. The carriage is surrounded. The plan has failed. You're taken back in the same carriage. now an open casket of hope. The city is awake this time. Word spreads quickly. By the time you reach the temple, a crowd has formed again. This one isn't quiet. They spit, they cheer, some chant "to the guillotine." You hear your name mixed into the noise. It doesn't sound like your name anymore. It sounds like a sentence. You're dragged through the courtyard like criminals. No more polite titles, no more velvet words. The guards don't hide their contempt. One of them throws your father against a wall. Your mother yells at them to stop. No one listens. Back in your cell, the door slams shut like the final act of a bad play. You sit on the floor. You can't feel your legs. Your brother curls up beside you and doesn't speak for hours. Your mother kneels and begins to pray faster than you've ever heard her, like the words are burning her throat. Later, when the shock has faded and silence returns, your father gathers you all and speaks. His voice is steady, but stripped of its usual softness. "This is not the end," he says. "It is only a new beginning." You nod, but inside you know something has shifted. Not just in the plan, in your family, in you. There's a strange, almost comical moment later that night when the Queen realizes she's lost her shoe during the struggle. She laughs, just once, and says, "Well, I suppose that was my last decent pair." No one joins her. The laugh hangs in the air, embarrassed, then vanishes like smoke. Historians argue over whether the escape ever had a real chance of success. Some say the plan was flawed from the beginning, too slow, too public, too dependent on loyalty that no longer existed. Others believe it could have worked if not for that one soldier, that one glance. But what haunts you isn't the failure, it's the hope. Hope is crueler than despair. Despair is numb, still manageable. Hope dances, hope sings, hope flutters at the edge of your vision like something you can almost touch. And then it disappears, and all you're left with is the memory of what might have been. After the failed escape, everything gets worse. The guards become stricter, the food becomes scarce. The whispers about trial and punishment become facts. And you? You fold the escape map into smaller and smaller squares until it's the size of your thumbnail. Then you burn it. Because you don't need to remember where you could have gone. You need to survive where you are. There's no dramatic announcement when your life changes again. Just a series of small removals, like threads being quietly pulled from a garment you're still wearing. First, your walks are taken away. Then your books, then your writing materials. Then the door is locked not just at night, but during the day. The key turning behind you with a click that echoes across the floor like a judgment. And then comes the worst of all. They separate you from your brother. It happens without warning. One morning, a group of guards enters the cramped room you've been sharing with Louis Charles. They're not shouting, not rough, not yet, but their intent is clear. One of them kneels beside your brother, who's still blinking sleep from his eyes. He says something about relocation, about how it's better for the boy, safer. You and your mother protest, of course, loudly. She stands between him and the guards. You grab his hand, try to pull him behind you, but one of them grabs your wrist, not hard enough to bruise, just hard enough to say you have no power here. Your brother's mouth opens, but no sound comes out. Just that wide-eyed, dry-mouthed look of a child who knows something terrible is happening, but doesn't yet understand the scale of it. He cries out for your mother. She screams his name. He's carried from the room, his heels dragging, his small voice getting smaller and smaller down the corridor until it's gone completely. The door slams. You pound on it until your fists ache. And just like that, he's gone. At first, they tell you he's just been moved to another chamber. That he's being educated, watched over, fed. It's for his own good, a guard says with a smirk so casual it could kill. But time passes, and you stop believing. No visits, no letters, no noises from the other side of the wall. The silence grows unbearable. Your mother begins writing notes on scraps of fabric and slipping them under the door, even though no one ever replies. You begin speaking to him through the walls, whispering, hoping he hears. And sometimes he does, you think. There's one night, cold wind scraping at the shuttered windows, when you hear a voice, faint, raspy. "Are you there?" it says. You leap from bed and press your ear to the stone. "Yes," you whisper. "I'm here." You talk for an hour, about nothing and everything, about the smell of bread, about the time he fell into the pond at Versailles, about the little carved elephant he used to keep under his pillow. You cry quietly, he does too. You swear you'll find him, that you'll hold his hand again, that this isn't forever. The next day he doesn't respond. He never does again. This is the beginning of your real captivity, not just behind walls, but inside your own mind. With your brother gone, your world narrows. The room feels smaller. The queen is quieter, her prayers longer and more frantic. Your father, by now in another section of the prison, is no longer allowed to see you. You catch glimpses of him only in your imagination, sitting on the edge of a thin mattress, carving shapes into wood to pass the time, trying to stay dignified while the revolution makes sport of his silence. The temple becomes your entire universe. You mark days with scratches under the bed. You memorize the patterns of the floor tiles. You invent little rituals, 3 steps to the window, 1 blink toward the sky, a whispered phrase under your breath before every meal. Still here, you say. Still me. You become intimate with the details of deprivation. Hunger has a sound. It clicks and groans inside you, not like pain but like erosion. Fatigue comes not just from sleepless nights but from holding in emotions too heavy to carry. You begin to forget what warm feels like, what softness feels like. You and your mother share a blanket made from coarse wool that smells faintly of oil and smoke. You sleep curled together, not for affection, though there is still plenty of that, but because warmth is a luxury now. Once, you see a rat in the corner of the room. It pauses, looks at you like an equal, and scurries away. You don't scream, you don't flinch. You simply watch it leave and wonder if you envy its freedom. There's an odd moment, days, or maybe weeks after your brother is taken, when you find one of his toys hidden in the mattress seam. A carved wooden lion, no longer than your thumb. You hold it so tightly it leaves an imprint in your palm. You consider giving it to a guard to return to him, then remember, there is no returning here, only taking. Your mother tries to keep your spirits up. She invents games, she recites stories of her childhood in Vienna, of snowball fights and sleigh rides and brothers who adored her. But you notice how often her voice trails off, how she looks at the walls too long. She's thinner now, her skin more translucent. There's a moment one morning when she pulls at the lace of her sleeve and says, "I once had 40 dresses like this." Then she laughs. I wonder where they are now. Sometimes you both pretend that you'll leave, that you'll go back to Austria, or to a small cottage in the countryside, that you'll plant a garden, that you'll read books beside a fireplace, that Louis Charles will come running through the door, muddy and loud, asking for jam. You say it aloud, build the fantasy brick by brick, but the walls never let you forget they're real. There's a long-standing debate among historians about what truly happened to your brother in that hidden room. Some say he was mistreated, others say he was brainwashed, taught to hate his own family. Some claim he was ill or poisoned, or simply forgotten. A few go even further, spinning conspiracy webs that say he escaped, that the boy who died wasn't really him, that he lived quietly under a false name. But you lived the truth. You saw his light dim, you heard it go out. One night you dream of him, older, healthy, standing in the Versailles garden, his arms outstretched. You run to him, but just as you reach him, he vanishes, leaving only the little lion in your hands. You wake in tears. Your mother doesn't ask why, she just holds you, and you both sit in silence, the kind only grief can carve. At first you expect him back any day. Every footstep beyond the door makes you lift your head. Every murmur from the guards makes your stomach twist into a tight little knot. You think, this is the day, this is the hour. But the hours pass, then the days, then the weeks, and the space your brother left behind does what all empty spaces eventually do. It stops echoing and just becomes part of the room. The queen changes after that. Not all at once, not in a way you could point to, but in small, heartbreaking ways. She smiles less, even when you try your best to cheer her. Her hands tremble when she folds the napkins, though she folds them anyway, insisting they must be arranged properly. She no longer corrects your posture. She no longer asks about your studies. And at night, when you lie beside her, you feel her heartbeat racing, as if her body is trying to flee even while her mind stands still. You talk less now. There's less to say. Conversations become mechanical. Have you eaten? Are you cold? Do you want the blanket tonight? But sometimes, late into the hours when even the rats are quiet, you both speak aloud to your brother, whispering into the dark as if he's hiding just under the bed, giggling behind a curtain. Do you remember the goat at Trianon? Your mother murmurs one night. The one that tried to eat his collar? You nod, eyes closed, and pretend you can hear his laughter on the other side of the wall. When your brother was taken, he cried your name. You still hear it in your dreams, fractured and distorted, like it's echoing from under ice. You sometimes wake gasping, calling back too late. The guards grow colder too, if that's possible. Some won't even look you in the eye. One of them begins whistling a revolutionary tune each time he slides your food under the door. He doesn't say your name, he calls you the little Austrian. You used to correct people, saying you were French. Now you just turn your back. Let them spit their nicknames. Let them believe you're made of marble instead of fear. Your body begins to betray you. Hunger gnaws at your belly, not as pain, but as numbness. Your skin bruises easily. Your joints ache when you stretch. You have stopped bleeding. Your womanhood arriving too fast, then vanishing again. Like it knows this is not a safe place to grow. The air is damp, the sheets perpetually cold. You develop a cough that your mother brushes off, but you know she's worried. You see her watching you in the morning when she thinks you're still asleep, lips pressed tight, her fingers curling around the edge of the mattress like she's afraid it might vanish too. And then the letters stop. For a while after your father's trial began, messages came to the door. Scraps of paper folded many times, smuggled in under bowls or tucked between pages of books. Your father wrote in code short phrases of encouragement. Be strong, be together, be better than them. You read and reread them until the creases tore. But now, nothing. The last thing you ever hear from him is a simple line scrawled in pencil on the back of a torn page of Psalms. I love you all. Always. You don't know when the execution is scheduled. You're not told, but you feel it in the walls, in the silence that expands outward like a balloon about to burst. On the morning it happens, the Queen doesn't rise from bed. She clutches her rosary so tightly it leaves marks in her palms. You sit beside her, both of you dressed in the same clothes from the day before. You hear the distant tolling of bells. You pretend not to know what it means. A few hours later, someone knocks softly and slides in a tray of food. No eye contact. No words. The Queen doesn't touch it. She stares out the window. He was brave, she says. You nod. So are you, you say, but she doesn't respond. Your father is gone. They killed him in public, with drums and cheers, and then they left you here to mourn in a room without curtains. You don't cry that day, neither does your mother. But that night you lie on the floor with your hands over your ears and mouth open in a scream that never quite reaches your throat. In the weeks that follow, your mother grows quieter, smaller. She combs your hair out of habit, but forgets halfway through. She prays longer and eats less. The light in her eyes flickers like a candle in a draught. You try to hold her together the way she once held you. You press cool cloths to her forehead. You beg her to eat. You sing the lullabies she once sang to you, even though your voice trembles and cracks in all the wrong places. Then one morning the door opens and they come for her. No explanation, no ceremony, just guards and the sound of keys in locks. She straightens her gown, kisses your forehead and says, "You're stronger than I ever was." Then she leaves. You never see her again. There's a debate that still lingers in scholarly circles whether Marie Antoinette cried on her way to the guillotine. Some say she wept openly. Others insist she held her head high until the very end. But you remember her final embrace, how steady her hands were even as her eyes glistened. You believe she left with dignity, even if the world wouldn't allow her peace. They don't tell you she's dead. They don't need to, you know. You feel it deep and exact, like the absence of a tooth that once ached so badly you couldn't sleep. Now it's just a hole. You are now the last of them, a Bourbon alone. People forget that after the storm and the spectacle, there's the silence. That after the executions, the prison didn't vanish. That you, the princess, the daughter of France, sat in a small room with a cracked window and nothing left but a broken lion toy and the echo of your family's last words. There's a strange comfort in the finality of it. No more wondering, no more hoping. You are what remains. And while the world rages on outside, inside you, something settles. Not peace, but purpose. You sit in the silence, your knees tucked under your chin, your breath shallow and slow. And it occurs to you that this might be the first time you've ever truly been alone. Not just without servants or your chaperones, not courtly alone, but soul alone. There are no guards posted directly inside the cell now, no family members whispering lullabies, no letters, no sound but your own heartbeat, loud in your ears like a metronome in an empty music hall. It is strange and awful and eerily still. You have become the girl in the shadow, not the daughter of France, not the child of a queen, just the girl who was not executed, yet, the one they weren't quite sure what to do with. The guards come only to deliver food and retrieve the dishes. They don't speak to you. Some look at you like a curiosity, others with contempt, a few with something almost like pity. You try to speak once, to ask for news of your brother, but the guard just shrugs and says, "Don't you mean the wolf cub?" and walks away. That's what they're calling him now, the little wolf. The boy raised to be a king, now rotting in a room no bigger than a closet. You hear stories vague and conflicting. A guard once mutters that your brother's been re-educated. Another claims he's unwell. No one says it directly, but you gather enough to understand. They're trying to make him forget you, forget your mother, forget your father, forget his name, forget he was ever anything other than what the revolution needs him to be. Evidence that royalty can be tamed or broken. You stop asking after that, and time becomes abstract. There are no clocks in your cell. The window is too small to let in sun. You learn to measure days by the rotation of meals, even though sometimes the food doesn't come, and you're left with a gnawing emptiness that feels like guilt. You whisper prayers, even though you're not sure what you believe anymore. The God of your mother feels very far away, the God of your father too quiet, so you create your own kind of faith, a ritual of sorts. You speak your family's names every morning. You touch your heart for each one. Louis, Marie, Charles, Joseph. And then, sometimes you say your own, just to make sure it still belongs to you. The walls begin to close in, not physically, but psychologically. The cell is small, yes, but your thoughts grow louder, and with no one to muffle them, they echo and multiply. You remember conversations from years ago. Whole dinners, specific looks, the time your father dropped a slice of pear and tried to hide it under his napkin. The way your mother's voice sounded when she said your name without any title attached. There's a fringe account, half legend, half footnote, that you begin talking to the shadows on the wall. Not out of madness, but necessity. They become your court, your family, your audience. One is your governess, one is your old pony, one is your brother. You speak to them when your voice feels weak. You ask them what you should do. You ask them if they forgive you for surviving. And then comes the trial. Not yours, hers. Your mother. They parade her through the court like a condemned actress playing the villain. You don't see it. They won't allow you. But you hear things. A guard whispers to another that they accused her of incest with your brother. That she stood startled at first, and then denied it so fiercely that even the courtroom grew still. You vomit into a bowl when you hear it. You imagine her face, her eyes, her voice cutting through the lies like glass through silk. They execute her 2 days later. You don't cry, you sit in your corner, and you hold your arms around your knees and you whisper, "I'm sorry, Mama." Again and again, until your voice breaks. You are 14, and for your birthday they give you nothing. No word from the outside, no acknowledgement. You spend the day staring at the cracks in the wall, counting them like stars. You lose count. You fall asleep curled against the wall because the mattress has started to mould, and the floor at least is honest. Sometime after days, weeks, who knows so, they move you. Not to freedom, just to another room, slightly bigger, still grey, still locked, but with one new feature, a chair. You sit in it every day, as if it's a throne made of splinters. You arrange yourself carefully, back straight, head high, and you imagine your mother watching you. You picture her saying you are still royal, no matter how they treat you. You pretend the chair is velvet. You pretend you are not a girl in rags eating onion broth from a tin bowl. You pretend because the alternative is to disappear, and you refuse to disappear. You are your father's daughter. You know history. You recite it in your head like a litany. Charlemagne, Philippe Auguste, Henri IV, Louis XIV, names carved into time like monuments. You say your own name after them and it feels ridiculous, but you say it anyway, because someone has to. Then one day a mouse enters your cell, and a real one, tiny, grey, terrified. You don't scream, you watch it. It watches you. It crawls into your empty bowl and sniffs. You tear a crumb from your crust and place it on the floor. It returns the next day, and the next. You name it Louisette. It becomes your first friend in months. You talk to her, you tell her stories, You even cry in front of her, something you've tried very hard not to do. She listens better than most courtiers ever did. Then she disappears too. Your guards begin to change. New faces, different uniforms, some less cruel, some just indifferent. You hear whispers about the revolution turning on itself. Robespierre has fallen. The guillotine is devouring its makers. The beast is eating its own tail, and still you remain. There's talk of re-evaluations, of cases being reviewed. You don't let yourself hope, not yet, but you sit straighter in your splinter chair. You are the daughter of the King of France, the sister of the Dauphin, the girl who has lost everyone and forgotten how to cry, but you are still here, and one day maybe the world will remember that. The morning they come for you, it feels like any other. You wake slowly, cold in your joints, your hair tangled against a damp pillow. You've learned not to rise too quickly, head rushes are sharp and dramatic, and you've fainted twice already this month. You murmur your usual greeting to no one. You say the names, your father's, your mother's, your brother's, like an invocation. You press a hand to your ribs to count them, more visible now than before. Then you wait for the guard to slide in your bowl of thin broth, maybe a heel of bread if you're lucky. But instead of food, they bring paper. 2 men enter, young, formally dressed, but not in military garb, civilian clothes. They look like functionaries, like the type of people who once stood near your father at court and waited for opportunities to cough politely during decisions. One of them, the older, has a bundle of documents. The other doesn't speak at all. Their presence feels wrong but not threatening, at least not immediately. They tell you that you are being released. At first, you don't understand the words. You hear them, but they bounce off your thoughts like pebbles on glass. Released? From what? To where? There's no fanfare, no explanation. They simply say, your sentence is complete. As if you were ever sentenced. As if surviving your entire family's destruction was a matter of paperwork. You don't move, you stare at them, then you blink. Then you ask, what about my brother? It's the first time you've spoken his name aloud in weeks. Their silence tells you everything. He's gone. Not in a way that means hiding, not in the way they took your mother or your father, dragged off for some kind of process. No, this silence is different. It's empty. It's the kind of silence that tells you there's nothing left to ask. You feel your body float. Not forward, not backward, just suspended. A single breath away from screaming. Instead, you nod. They ask you to sign something. You don't read it. You hold the quill in your shaking hand and scrawl a version of your name that looks like it was written underwater. You don't care. You just want to leave. Not because you believe you're safe now, but because staying means turning into dust. They give you clothes, new ones, but plain, dark, stiff in the sleeves. You dress in front of them because shame has long since left you. You haven't seen a mirror in nearly a year. You have no idea what your face looks like now. All you know is that your body has shrunk to something functional and strange. You barely recognize your own hands. The doors open, and for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, you step outside. The light hits you like a blow. It's cold and grey, not even sunny, but it's open sky. You squint like a prisoner dragged into daylight, which of course you are. Your legs tremble. The street outside the temple is quiet. No cheering mobs, no swarming guards, just a carriage. You expect no one, and that's what you find. No family, no familiar face. Just the escort, the coachman, and silence. They say you're to be taken into exile, to your mother's family in Austria. You will live with relatives, one of them explains. You are no longer required here. Required. As though you were a tax document. A wartime footnote. The journey is long, cold. Your breath fogs the windows, and you trace shapes on the glass just to pass the time. You don't ask where you're going anymore. You already know. You're going to wherever they want to forget you. The carriage is cramped, but warmer than the cell. You're given food. Real food. Meat even. You eat sauce, slowly. You're afraid of it. Your stomach protests. There's a strange comfort in the motion. You haven't moved faster than a walk in months. Now you're speeding through the countryside like something being thrown back into the world. You watch the trees blur past and imagine what your brother might have said. He would have counted the horses, named them, made up stories for each one. You imagine he's beside you now, his head on your shoulder, asleep. But he's not. There's a detail no one bothers to mention. When you leave, they don't let you take anything. No keepsakes, no pails, no sketches, not even the wooden lion you kept hidden in your sleeve. You asked for it once. The guard who escorted you out shrugged and said, "It's been burned." You cry, but not the way you used to. Not big sobs. It's more like a slow leak behind your eyes, constant and silent. You don't wipe the tears. They just dry on your cheeks like salt. At the border, you're handed over to Austrian officials like a diplomatic parcel. They're polite, cold but not cruel. One bows and says, "Welcome home." You say nothing, because this is not your home. They take you to Vienna, a sprawling palace. You're given a room, not quite lavish, not quite austere. You sleep in a bed with linens that don't smell of mould. You're bathed, you're clothed, you're watched. The servants speak to you kindly, but never too familiarly. You're no longer a royal, you're a relic. Your relatives receive you with the kind of distant affection people reserve for guests they weren't expecting. You're too French for them, too Catholic, too haunted. One of your aunts remarks that you're surprisingly silent for a girl who survived so much. You smile and say, "That's why." You're still young, but you feel ancient. You've aged in rooms with no clocks, under ceilings that never changed. You speak softly now, but your thoughts are sharp. Your eyes flick over every room for exits. You don't trust closed doors. You don't flinch at raised voices. You assess them. You're not the girl they remember. One day, a scholar comes to meet you. A thin man with ink-stained cuffs and too many questions. He wants to write your story. People want to know what it was like, he says. What happened in the temple? You ask why. He says, "So it won't happen again." You don't believe him. You do not give him the story. Not all of it. Just the pieces that won't make you bleed. You let him write what he wants. You know the truth. You lived it. The finality of it settles into you not like a boulder, but like snow. Quiet, steady, cold. You have been many things. Daughter of a king, sister of a Dauphin, witness to a revolution, survivor of a family executed one by one. Now you are simply a girl in a quiet palace, trying to remember how to feel safe in a room alone. You wonder what your brother would look like now. Would he still have those eyes, that crooked smile? Would he forgive you for surviving? You like to think he would. In the quiet, bloodless halls of the Austrian palace, you become a shadow that walks in silk slippers. No longer called Madame Royale, no longer bowed to with reverence, and certainly not treated like a girl whose childhood unravelled behind locked doors. Here, you are simply Marie-Thérèse Charlotte, a guest, a ghost, a thread of a bloodline the world seems eager to snip clean. The people around you speak softly and smile tightly. Your relatives try, in that distant, aristocratic way, to be welcoming, but they don't know what to do with you. This girl who once sat at the right hand of a queen, who watched her family vanish in pieces, who returned not with a crown, but with silence. You learn the art of conversation again, though it feels like acting. You answer politely when spoken to. You dine at the proper hour with proper posture, on food that no longer tastes of ash. You are not a prisoner anymore, but you have no illusions about freedom. Your cage is simply larger, gilded with manners and filled with people who'd rather not hear what you've seen. One of your cousins says one day, "You're lucky to be alive." She means it as kindness. You nod. You don't say what you're thinking. Lucky. My brother was called a wolf and left to rot. My mother died with the weight of her name chained to her ankles. My father's blood darkened the blade like any criminal. My luck is just survival. But you don't say that. You smile instead, the way your mother taught you when smiles were armour. There is eventually a funeral for your brother. A quiet one, symbolic. No body, just an empty casket and a few sympathetic murmurs from those who never met him. You stand there, stiff and dry-eyed, listening to a priest say things like innocent and martyr and God's plan. You listen and say nothing. You think of his tiny hands, his wheezing breath, the toy lion he slept with tucked under his chin. You think of the silence that answered when you whispered through the walls. Afterward, they ask if you'd like to say a few words. You decline. You've said them already 1,000 times in the dark. The palace assigns you a lady in waiting. She is young, with red cheeks and a voice that trembles when she says your name. You don't have to curtsy, you tell her once. I'm not a princess anymore. She flushes and says, "You are to me." You don't correct her again. You take walks now, alone or with company. The gardens are beautiful but wrong, too manicured, too symmetrical. Versailles had been opulent, yes, but wild in its corners. There was life in the roses, danger in the hedges. Here, everything is tamed. And you, of all people, do not trust things that pretend to be harmless. Letters arrive from distant nobles offering condolences, veiled marriage proposals, inquiries into your condition, as if trauma is an ailment one might outgrow, like a rash or a fever. You ignore most of them. One letter, unsigned, simply says, "France forgives you." You tear it in half without reading the rest. Forgiveness implies guilt, and you carry enough of that already. There's a persistent rumour that your brother might have survived, that the child who died was not Louis Charles, but another, switched at the last moment, spirited away by loyalists. You want to believe it. You ache to believe it. You read every report, every supposed sighting. A boy in Belgium with a regal air, a teenager in Poland who speaks perfect French, a pale-eyed apprentice in London who claims to remember nothing before the age of 8. You know they're all lies. The real boy died alone. You felt it in your bones the moment they took him. He faded long before his body gave out. Still, you keep one of the stories in a drawer, not because you believe it, but because you need something to wonder about. As you grow older, you begin to wonder who you are now. You're no longer a daughter, no longer a sister, no longer even quite a princess. You are a survivor. But that title wears heavy on your shoulders. You wonder if there's a version of yourself that can exist outside of mourning, one that can laugh without flinching, one that can love without fear of loss. It takes time, years in fact, but slowly the idea of a future begins to take shape. The King of France is dead, your mother is dead, your brother is gone, but you are still here. You can't go back, but maybe you can go forward. And then one morning someone new arrives. A man. He stands tall with the bearing of a soldier and the gaze of someone who's spent time in real silence. You're told his name is Louis Antoine, a Bourbon cousin, distant but not unfamiliar. He's quiet, gentle in a way that's not soft but deliberate. He does not look at you with pity. He speaks to you as if you are whole. He asks if you'd like to ride. You haven't been on a horse in years. At first you refuse. Then the next day you say yes. The wind in your hair as you gallop through the fields shocks something loose inside you. It's not joy, not yet, but it's motion. And that's something. Louis Antoine begins walking with you in the gardens. He does not ask about the temple. He does not mention the revolution. Instead, he talks of astronomy, music, politics. He lets you speak. He lets you be silent. He never tries to fix you. He simply sees you. And after all you've been through, that feels like a miracle. They say he's been instructed to court you, that marrying the last daughter of Louis XVI would be a powerful symbol. You know this. He knows this. But still, he brings you lilies, not because it's expected, but because you once said you preferred them to roses. You begin to write again, first in secret, then openly, memoirs, letters, stories. The pages are messy, sometimes tear-stained, but they are yours. You're not writing for history, you're writing for the girl who sat in a prison cell and whispered names into the dark, desperate to remember who she was. Historians will debate what kind of woman you became, bitter, resilient, tragic, strong, but none of them will ever understand what it took simply to keep breathing, to keep walking, to keep eating, to say your name without flinching. You are Marie-Thérèse, Charlotte de France, and you survived. Not as a symbol, as yourself. At first, the quiet feels like a betrayal. After years of noise, of chants outside prison gates, of cell doors slamming, of the desperate crying of your brother, and the whispered prayers of your mother, this new silence in exile feels artificial, like cotton packed around your senses. There are no screams in Vienna, no gunfire, no pounding footsteps or sharpening blades, only the crisp click of boots on marble, the creak of carriage wheels, and the polite murmur of nobles who don't know whether to treat you like a tragedy or a museum piece. You wake in your new chamber each morning to filtered light, rich fabrics, and servants who curtsy and speak too gently. They treat you like a fragile vase rescued from a burning house, valuable, yes, but likely to crack if touched. One girl sets your brush down on the vanity and asks if you'd like her to comb your hair. You hesitate. The last hands to do that were your mother's. You finally say yes. Her touch is light, and your scalp tingles at the unfamiliar kindness. You stare at your reflection in the mirror, still surprised by the length of your hair, by how much of yourself still looks like her. You do not cry anymore, not because you're brave, but because your tears feel spent, like ink at the bottom of a dry well. You've already cried for your father, your mother, your brother, your city, your childhood, your name. There is nothing left but quiet. And strangely, that quiet begins to shape you, not to heal you, but to help you hide. The people of Austria do not ask you what it was like. Not really. They skirt the topic like a wound still bleeding beneath lace. That time, they call it. Or the recent difficulties. One noblewoman, pretending to be clever, calls the revolution a phase. You do not reply. You just fix her with a look that stops her laughter mid-breath. Still, the questions come eventually, disguised but pointed. Do you remember the Queen's last ball? Did you ever see the Bastille before it fell? What was your brother like? You answer only what you want to. The rest you keep buried behind your tongue, where it curdles into stories too painful to give away. You hear strange things, wild things, rumours that someone claiming to be your brother has surfaced in Switzerland, that another boy, a baker's apprentice, insists he is Louis Charles, and has proof in the form of a birthmark and a string of broken French. You ask for nothing. You know better than to hope, but you do dream. And in your dreams he is alive, always the same age he was when you last saw him, small, pale, coughing gently in the dark. You see him most often at twilight, just before the candles are lit. In the corner of the room behind the garden gate, sitting by the fire in your mind. You never speak to him in these dreams. You just watch, because you know if you see, he'll disappear. Your days stretch. You fill them with needlework, with reading, with walks under clipped hedges, and around cold fountains that no one really cares for anymore. You write in secret, pages upon pages, careful and slow. You begin your memoir not as a project, but as a necessity. It's the only way you can be sure that you were real, that the temple was real, that Versailles wasn't just some dream you had before everything cracked open. You keep your words honest, blunt, sometimes so raw that even your hand trembles. You write about how your brother coughed blood into his sheets, about how your mother sang lullabies to a wall, about how your father looked smaller when he prayed. You write about the guards who whistled revolutionary songs while sliding food under the door, and the single window that let in light too late to matter. You write because forgetting would be another death. You survived, and so must the truth. And yet, despite the pain, you begin to notice moments of something that almost resembles peace. The way the afternoon light hits the stone bench in the garden, the softness of clean sheets, the smell of bread baked without fear. You catch yourself humming sometimes, not a melody you know, but one your body remembers, something you used to sing to your brother when he couldn't sleep. You stop when you notice it, but sometimes you let it finish. Louis Antoine continues his visits. His presence is gentle, never demanding. He doesn't flinch when you speak of the past, nor does he press when you fall silent. Once, you find a book on your writing desk, a small volume of Virgil inscribed with a note, to remember that we are more than what happens to us. You do not cry, you press the book to your chest and whisper, "Thank you," into the paper. He never asked you to marry him. Not directly. He simply stays, listens, lets you rebuild yourself on your own terms, and eventually you do say yes. Not because of politics or legacy, though they surely factor in. You say yes because he sees you not as a relic or a ghost, but as someone who might still become something new. The ceremony is quiet, simple, the kind your mother never imagined for you, and yet it feels right. You wear lavender subdue instead of white. You carry no bouquet. But when you speak your vows, you speak them with conviction. Not because you believe in happily ever after, but because you believe in now. You begin to find a rhythm again. You help with charity work, visit orphanages, answer letters from strangers who call you brave. You are no longer royal. You are no longer imprisoned. You are something in between, something after. One afternoon, a little girl in the village tugs on your sleeve and asks, "Are you really a princess?" You kneel and smile. "I was," you say. "And then I wasn't. And now I'm something else." The girl tilts her head. "What?" You touch her cheek gently. "Alive." That night you write those words in your journal and underline them, because that's what you are. Not perfect, not untouched, but alive. And after everything you've lost, that is no small victory. The mystery of your brother's fate doesn't die with the revolution, it simply changes form. It becomes a ghost that haunts the edges of every ballroom, every whispered conversation, every headline. You grow older, but the rumours grow louder. They come in waves, these Louis Charles sightings. First in Belgium, then Prussia, then Bavaria. Always a boy who looks a little too much like him, Always a man with a story that almost fits. Each time the public leans in, breath held. Is this him? Has the prince returned? And each time you brace yourself, you're asked again and again, both in private and in rooms full of flickering chandeliers and watchful eyes. Do you believe he survived? You never answer the same way twice. Sometimes you say yes, because hope is a balm. Other times you say no, because denial is simpler than mourning the same person twice. And on rare days you just smile and say nothing at all, because some wounds aren't for display. But the speculation follows you like perfume you didn't choose. You open newspapers to find claims from men with suspicious pedigrees and forged papers. One claims to remember the Queen's lullabies. Another says he escaped in a laundry cart. A third says nothing at all, just stares at you across a banquet table like he's waiting for you to see something in his eyes. You always look, you always want to believe, but belief comes at a cost. Once you allow yourself a meeting. It's arranged in secret, in a small salon off the side of a country estate. The man is quiet, courteous, and carries himself with a kind of hesitant grace. He bows too deeply, and when he rises, there's something familiar in the way his lip trembles ever so slightly when he speaks. He tells a story that sounds like it was stitched together from overheard fragments of your life. And for one wild, traitorous second, you want to fling yourself forward and wrap your arms around him. But then he mentions the goat at Petit Trianon, and he gets it wrong. He says it was white. It wasn't. It was brown, with one crooked horn and a pink ribbon that your brother insisted on tying around its neck every morning. You nod politely, say thank you, and never see the man again. Later, alone in your room, you take out the only thing you've ever kept from the temple. A scrap of the sheet your brother used to sleep under, smuggled out by a sympathetic guard who risked his life to deliver it to you years after your release. It's worn thin, soft from time and salt from tears. You press it to your lips and whisper, "I would know you anywhere." It's not true, but it feels like a promise you still need to make. The mystery becomes more than just a question of identity. It becomes a national obsession. The French, restless under shifting governments and uncertain futures, cling to the idea of the lost prince like it's a talisman against shame. A way to believe that innocence didn't die in that tower. That maybe, just maybe, France can be forgiven if the child lived. There are debates, articles, heated arguments in court circles. New contenders pop up with fresh scars, fresh tales, fresh support from opportunistic nobles looking to climb back into power on the shoulders of a miracle. Some come with lockets, some come with birthmarks, some come with rehearsed trauma that they recite too perfectly. You learn to spot them quickly. Real pain doesn't perform like that. Real trauma stutters. One man writes to you claiming to be Louis Charles and asks you to come home to him. He signs his letter, your brother, who forgives you. You don't respond. You burn it, fingers trembling. Because if there's one thing your brother would never do, it's make you beg. Behind closed doors, you keep a journal of these claimants. Not because you believe them, but because you don't want to forget what belief once felt like. Each entry is short. Name, date, location, what they said. One line always follows, not him. Some scholars say your refusal to endorse a claimant prolonged the monarchy's inability to rebuild. Others say you protected the dignity of your brother's memory. Both may be true, but you weren't thinking about legacy. You were thinking about a little boy in a cold room whispering your name through a wall clinging to a lion carved from wood. You are in your 30s now, and the world has reshaped itself. Kings have fallen and risen. The people who once marched with pitchforks now sell bread. Your own name carries the weight of 100 different narratives. Heroine, relic, royalist pawn. You've been painted, praised and pitied but rarely understood. Sometimes you reread your own memoirs, not out of vanity but necessity. You remind yourself of what you endured. You look for proof that your memories are still yours, that they weren't twisted by time or softened by mercy. Louis Antoine finds you one evening in the garden sitting under a tree with your brother's cloth pressed between the pages of a book. He doesn't speak. He just sits beside you and after a while takes your hand. You don't need to explain. He's always known how to sit with your silence. There's a strange little footnote in the history books that says you once said, "The dead are more real to me than the living." You don't remember saying it, but it's close enough to the truth. And yet you keep living. You attend dinners, you help with charities, you write letters in your neat, careful hand. You say yes to things. You say no when you must. You even laugh, less like a songbird, more like a woman who's seen the worst and is still willing to offer warmth. Your brother will always be 10 years old in your mind. Always with that mop of hair, those wide eyes, that cough he tried to hide. And even though you know, rationally, coldly, historically, that he died in that cell alone and unnamed, you carry him with you like a heartbeat behind your own. Because what they never understood, those men with their fake scars and their borrowed memories, is that Louis Charles wasn't just a name to reclaim. He was a person, a child, a life, and you were his sister, and that above all else you remember. The strangest thing about survival is how ordinary it becomes. You expect it to feel like a triumph. You think there will be horns, or at the very least a moment when the world pauses to say, you did it. You lived. But that moment never comes. There's no fanfare. Just morning after morning of waking up, breathing in, breathing out, and deciding again not to shatter. Your body goes on long after your heart has forgotten how to expect anything, and then the Republic decides you must be re-educated. It comes politely, of course, as all terrible things do. A letter, an appointment, a smiling official who tells you in French so pristine it sounds almost antiseptic. It would benefit your legacy, mademoiselle, to understand the new values of the nation. You resist the urge to ask if those values include the guillotine. You agree. What choice do you have? They assign you a tutor. He is young, earnest, a product of the post-terror intellectual class. He smells of ink and desperation. He arrives with books under his arm, revolutionary pamphlets tucked between Rousseau and Voltaire. He says things like liberté and égalité with breathless reverence. You wonder if he's ever gone hungry. You wonder if he's ever watched his family die one by one. Still, you listen. He teaches you the correct version of French history, the one with kings as villains and mobs as martyrs. He reads from a textbook that describes your father as a man of sluggish intellect and dangerous indulgence. You nod. You say nothing. Inside, you remember your father's hands, large and calloused, gently showing you how to adjust a telescope lens in the observatory at Versailles. You remember how he used to carve wooden birds when he couldn't sleep. The tutor wants you to understand that the revolution was necessary, that it was beautiful. He recites Robespierre's speeches like scripture. You stare at his mouth and wonder if he's ever kissed someone after tasting blood. Once he says, "The people needed justice." You finally reply, "So they killed a child." He doesn't speak for the rest of the lesson. Despite his ideology, he's not unkind. One afternoon, after a long silence between paragraphs, he says, "You don't have to hate all of it." You look up. The Republic, it's not all bad. And he's right in a way. You don't hate it. Not all of it. You hate what it did, what it became. But ideas, in themselves, aren't monsters. Only the men who twist them. You begin to read the books he leaves behind. Not because you want to, but because you feel you must. You underline passages. You write angry notes in the margins. You argue, not aloud, but on the page. You form opinions, complicated ones. You realize that the world has moved on without you, but that doesn't mean you don't belong in it. Your education continues, but not just in the classrooms they provide. You learn how to speak carefully in salons full of wary nobles and ex-revolutionaries, how to nod when you hear your parents referred to as symbols of tyranny, how to compliment people who once toasted the deaths of your loved ones. You become fluent in the new language of diplomacy, smiling through clenched teeth, offering olive branches while hiding your scars. They even take you to the theatre. A tragedy, naturally. You sit stiffly beside Louis Antoine, trying to follow the plot through a haze of noise and memory. The heroine dies nobly. The audience weeps. You do not. You've already seen the kind of death that doesn't end with applause. Later, someone asks if you enjoyed the performance. It was beautiful, you say, but the blood looked too clean. Occasionally they parade you at official functions, the last Bourbon girl. A living relic. People shake your hand like they're touching marble. They speak in soft tones. They look at you as though waiting for you to shatter into tragic poetry. You don't. You hold your chin high. You smile when you must. Once, a man tells you that your survival is proof that the revolution had mercy. You laugh in his face. You can't help it. It bubbles out like something sour. Mercy, you say. My brother starved in the dark while rats picked crumbs from his hair. My mother died mocked by a crowd of drunk men. My father prayed before an executioner who called him fat. That's mercy. He says nothing, but he does not speak to you again. Your re-education continues in subtler ways. You are asked to pose for a portrait, one that shows your renewal. The painter is skilled but hesitant. He asks what colours you prefer. You tell him to paint you as you are. No embellishments, you say. No illusions. You sit in the same dress you wear every week. No pearls, no crown. He paints you with tired eyes, a straight back, and hands that look like they have held too many ghosts. When it's finished, people praise it for its haunting realism. You think it's the only honest image ever made of you. In the evenings, you take long walks with Louis Antoine. You don't talk much during these walks. Sometimes he tells you little things, what the ministers are saying, how the weather might turn. Sometimes he brings a flower from the path and tucks it behind your ear without a word. It's the only part of your day that doesn't feel like performance. You ask him once, "Do you think I'll ever stop being someone else's idea of me?" He doesn't answer right away. Then he says, "Maybe not, but you don't have to let it define you." And so you begin to define yourself. Not as a royal, not as a martyr, not as a symbol, but as a woman. You write more, not just memories but thoughts, arguments, questions. You start keeping a second journal hidden from the eyes of biographers and court readers. It's full of contradictions. You praise the revolution's idea and curse its execution. You defend your family but admit their blind spots. You consider that your country might love freedom but still be afraid of it. No one teaches you this version of yourself. You learn it alone. And in that quiet, in that messy, uncomfortable relearning of what it means to be human again, you find something that surprises you. Not joy, not yet, but the beginning of a mind that belongs only to you. Freedom, when it finally arrives in name as well as in function, feels anticlimactic. There's no grand announcement, no royal decree, no crowd outside waiting to cheer your return to the world. Just a quiet nod from a man in uniform who informs you almost sheepishly that your name has been cleared. You are no longer considered politically dangerous. You may travel, reside where you wish, marry, live. That last word, live, is offered like a gift, but it sits awkwardly in your hand like something you're not sure you remember how to unwrap. You're free, yes, but never quite unshackled. Everyone knows your story. They know the tower, the trials, the guillotine. They know your lineage. They know your silence. What they don't know, and what few dare to ask, is what it actually did to you. How the noise of keys turning in locks still makes you flinch. How you measure a room by how easy it would be to escape. How you sleep with one hand curled, not around a pillow, but around the shape of a memory you've carried for years. You moved to Austria for a time, then returned to France. By now, the monarchy is once again shuffling its cards, trying to reorganize itself into something less embarrassing. You are received politely, though not quite warmly. The court doesn't know what to make of you. You're the last living child of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, a title that no longer inspires the awe it once did. Instead, it leaves people uncertain, like they've stumbled across a living painting. Beautiful, tragic, and much too real. There are dinners, of course, always dinners, long tables, polished forks, carefully folded napkins. People say your Grace and Madame Royale again, as if the blood on your name has faded with time. You smile, you eat, you say the proper things, you're dressed in mourning colours, though technically you've been in mourning your entire life. You return to Versailles once, not for long, just a visit, sanctioned and supervised. The palace is dusty, overgrown in places, eerily silent in others. You walk the hall of mirrors and see your reflection repeated 100 times. You barely recognise yourself. This is the place where you once danced in satin shoes, where your brother chased pigeons, where your mother laughed too loudly for the etiquette books. Now it smells of disuse and old water, like memory left too long in the open air. In the Queen's chamber, you find yourself reaching out to touch the wall where a painting once hung. Your hand lingers there, not quite touching, as if your fingers might absorb the past through the plaster. You say nothing. The guards behind you shift awkwardly, unsure whether to offer sympathy or silence. You walk out without another glance. Back in Paris, the city feels like a place both entirely new and eerily familiar. The streets are wider now, the rhythm different, but the bones are the same. You pass a bakery and remember how your mother once said the scent of baking bread was her favourite thing about France. Not perfume, she told you, but bread. The irony is so bitter, it nearly chokes you. Strangers recognise you sometimes. They whisper. They stare. Most keep their distance. A few approach you timidly. They speak in half sentences, apologies, condolences, confused gratitude. One man kneels in front of you at a flower market and says, "We were wrong." You place a hand on his shoulder. "We were all wrong," you reply, because it's true. There is a part of you that wants to leave, to vanish into another name, another city, perhaps even another country. But you stay, not out of duty, not entirely out of stubbornness. You stay because you know your presence is an anchor, a reminder, a quiet testament to what happens when a nation burns its own future in the name of freedom. You marry Louis Antoine eventually, not for politics, though people assume as much. You marry him because he is the only person who doesn't look at you and see a tragedy. He sees a woman who survived, who can still argue about literature and press flowers into books and laugh, yes, laugh without apology. Your marriage is not grand, it is not passionate in the way stories describe, it is better than that. It is steady, safe. You learn to share space again, to sleep beside someone who breathes evenly, to let someone else hold your silence without trying to fix it. He never asks for more than you can give, and that in itself is a kind of miracle. You travel with him, you attend court functions when required, you write your memoirs, though not all at once. They come in fragments. Some pages take years, others pour out in a single breathless night. You describe the temple in sharp detail, the way the air tasted, the way your brother cried only when he thought you were asleep. You write it all down, not for pity, not even for truth. You write to be free. People read your memoir and call you brave. They say you're dignified, that you carry the weight of history like a queen. You accept the compliments, though you don't always recognize the woman they're speaking of. Because here's what no one tells you. Surviving makes you a kind of ghost. Not because you're dead, but because so many versions of you died along the way. The little girl in the gilded nursery, the sister in the dark cell, the daughter watching the blade fall. All gone, and what's left is something no painter ever captured. Something more complicated than sainthood or royalty or victimhood. You are you, and sometimes, late at night, you allow yourself to feel what that really means. You sit by the window looking out at a garden, and remember that once you were not expected to survive this. Not just the revolution, but the aftermath, the years of being a symbol, a mystery, a thing. But here you are, alive, wounded, yes, watchful always, but still capable of reaching for the future. Your freedom may have come late, but now it is yours. The past clings to you in ways you don't always notice, until you do. A flicker of motion from the corner of your eye, the snap of wood, echoing like a cell door, a child's voice lifted in a certain key. They all yank you back with invisible strings, sudden and sharp. You're no longer in a sunny drawing room in Bordeaux or a quiet parlour in Prague. You're back in the temple, in the half-light, with the smell of damp stone and the breath of your brother just behind you, fragile and raspy. The guillotine is gone now, dismantled and buried under the layers of new republics and restored monarchies. But its shadow is long, longer than any crown, any anthem. You carry it with you like an extra bone in your spine, something no one can see but you always feel. The trauma doesn't scream anymore, it hums, a background frequency to every quiet dinner, every festival, every ride in a carriage that moves too slowly past crowds. People still cheer sometimes. There are factions loyal to the Bourbons, of course. They sing your father's name. They call your mother a saint. They speak of your brother as a martyr king, Louis XVII, even though his reign existed only on paper, in exile, in imagination. But none of them really knew him. None of them heard the sound he made when he tried to hide his cough. None of them saw the bruises, or smelled the mildew, or counted the days without sunlight. It's not their fault. Memory has a way of cleaning things up, but you remember, and remembering isn't always a choice. You've become a symbol, yes, but one the world doesn't quite know what to do with. You're not a revolutionary, not a royalist fanatic, not a helpless victim, not a perfect survivor. You're inconveniently human, and so they fold you into footnotes, romanticized portraits, half-true biographies. They make your hair a little lighter, your waist a little smaller, your grief more poetic. Sometimes you catch sight of yourself in a painting and feel nothing. She's not you. She's a ghost of a ghost, someone built to be palatable. You try not to be bitter. You succeed most of the time. And you do what you can to make peace with the contradictions of your existence. You support charities for the poor. You correspond with scholars. You visit hospitals and give speeches with carefully measured warmth. You speak of France not as a wound, but as a responsibility. People call you gracious. You're just tired. Sometimes you pass the old prison by carriage. The temple's tower, now half ruined, shrouded in ivy and time. It no longer functions as anything. A monument to nothing. The people passing by don't look twice. To most, it's just another structure from a darker time. But to you, it's a tombstone. Not only for your brother, but for the child you used to be. The one who once laughed freely. The one who still believed silk curtains could protect you from history. You've tried to forgive France, and that's the truth of it. You've tried. You've forgiven the people who turned away as your mother was carted to her death. You've forgiven the schoolteacher who later admitted to testifying against your father out of fear. You've even forgiven the guards who laughed outside your cell as you mourned. But what you can't forgive, what you don't even try to, is the forgetting. The eagerness with which the world moved on. How quickly they stopped saying his name. How the silence around your brother became more convenient than his story. Because forgetting is a kind of cruelty too. One that comes in polished shoes and clean hands. There's a long-standing academic debate about whether you ever found true peace. Some say yes, that you built a respectable life, or that your marriage was stable, that you found solace in faith. Others argue that your public grace masked a constant inner torment, that you were never truly allowed to be anything but a symbol. The truth, like everything about you, lies somewhere in the shadows between. Your faith deepens over time, but it's not the blind kind. It's the faith of someone who's seen how little control she has, and clings to the idea that something greater might exist. Not because you're convinced, but because the alternative feels unbearable. You attend Mass. You light candles. You kneel with hands folded and eyes open. You pray for your family, not for their souls, but for their memory. You keep your brother's cloth tucked into your journal until the day it crumbles. It becomes powder in your fingers, soft and meaningless, and you weep for it. Not because of what it was, but because it's one more thing you've lost that can't be replaced. You do not have children. Not by choice and not entirely by chance. You never speak about it publicly. People speculate, of course. Some whisper of a medical condition, others of a curse. The truth is simpler. Your body never quite recovered. Your mind couldn't allow the idea of raising something in a world that had cheered for your mother's head. It never felt safe enough. So you become a different kind of mother. Protector of memory, guardian of legacy. You correspond with the young noblewomen. You write letters filled with practical advice and dark humour. History you once wrote to a girl of 16 is not your friend, but if you must dance with it, wear shoes you can run in. They keep your letters. Some are published, some are lost, but the voice in them, that dry, haunted wisdom that survives. And in rare, unguarded moments, you do laugh. Not often, not carelessly, but when Louis Antoine reads something ridiculous from a local pamphlet, or when a child at an orphanage tugs your hand and asks if you were the princess who didn't get guillotined, you find yourself smiling. Not for show, not for diplomacy, but because life is absurd, and sometimes that absurdity is the only thing that saves you. In these moments, the ghost of the guillotine fades. Not gone, never gone, but pushed into the background, replaced by the clink of teacups or the rustle of garden leaves. You live, not as the monarchy hoped, not as the revolution feared, but as yourself, which is the greatest rebellion of all. Exile takes many forms. Sometimes it looks like a frozen mountain village with the wind scratching at the windows. Other times, it looks like a polished salon in an unfamiliar capital, where everyone smiles just a little too tightly and says your name like it's a question they're afraid to ask. But most of the time, exile is invisible. It lives inside you. It's a pause in your step before crossing a threshold. It's the moment between your heartbeat and someone else's handshake, when you wonder whether they see you, or just the history stitched into your silhouette. After years of drifting between cities and countries, between versions of yourself, you end up in what the papers called respectable retirement. The word retirement sounds wrong. It implies rest, something earned. But you're not resting, you're enduring. Still answering letters, still being photographed, still sitting at the edges of courtly functions like a living fossil. Everyone knows who you were, fewer know who you are, but they still send invitations, still offer you the seat near the head of the table, still refer to you as Madame Royale, as if the last 50 years have just been a very long intermission. You live in Schloss Frostorf now, a quiet Austrian estate tucked between gentle hills and aging pines. It's a beautiful place in the way old houses can be, full of creaks and memories and air that holds on to the past like it's afraid to let go. It is not home, but it's the closest you've come to one. You keep your days structured. Breakfast at 8, walk at 10, letters after lunch. You sit in the same armchair most afternoon, staring at a garden that changes with the seasons but always seems just a little too distant. Your bookshelves are full, though you no longer read as much as you used to. Your eyes tire faster now and the words blur. But you run your hands over the spines like old friends. Virgil, Pascal, Rousseau, even Voltaire, despite everything. Louis Antoine died quietly. You were with him, holding his hand. He murmured your name one last time, and then simply stopped breathing. No drama, no long speeches, just an ending, like a curtain being drawn. You miss him in small ways, in the empty chair across from yours, in the quiet lack of footsteps behind you, in the way your tea always cools too fast now because there's no one to remind you to drink it. He was the one person who never asked you to be anything but what you were, and now you're alone again, in the truest, oldest sense. Some days you find yourself speaking aloud to him. Not prayers, just sentences, observations. The roses bloomed late this year, you'll say, sipping tea. There was a fox in the orchard this morning. I think he's found the chicken coop. No one answers, but it helps. You write less now, though your handwriting has become more beautiful with age. Flowing and deliberate, like a dance done slowly and with great care. Your final memoir remains unfinished. You keep promising yourself you'll complete it, that you'll close the loop, but every time you try, you find the ending elusive. How do you end a story that never really gave you the chance to begin? The local villagers are kind, if distant. They call you the French lady, or sometimes the queen who never was. The children are curious but cautious. One bold boy once asked if you'd really been in prison. You told him yes, and he stared at you for a moment before saying, "Did it hurt?" You nodded. A little. That seemed to satisfy him. There are portraits in the hall now of your parents, your brother, even yourself at various stages of life. The one of your mother shows her in her grand, powdered-haired glory, wearing the extravagant gown the revolution hated so much. But you remember her best with her sleeves rolled up, kneeling in the prison cell to button your shoe. The paintings lie. They always do. They polish the cracks and smooth over the truth. And still visitors come. French royalists, mostly. People who believe your blood holds significance, that you're a living talisman for a past they want back. They come with reverent expressions and grandiose ideas, whispering of Bourbon restoration, of legacies reclaimed. You smile, you nod, you pour tea, but inside you know the truth. There is no throne that can fix what was broken. You're not interested in thrones anymore. Once, a woman arrives with her daughter, a girl no older than 12. The child stares at you like you're a painting come to life. She offers you a daisy, trembling. You take it gently. "What's your name?" you ask. "Louise," she whispers. "Like your brother?" You pause. "Yes," you say, "just like my brother." You press the daisy into a book that night. It still rests there, brittle and faded, but intact. The mystery of your brother's death remains unresolved in the public mind. Theories still bloom like weeds. Another self-proclaimed Louis Charles surfaced just last year. The papers ran with it, of course. The public loves a myth more than it loves the truth. But you didn't read the articles. You didn't open the letters asking for your opinion. You simply walked to your brother's portrait in the library and touched his face. "They'll never know you like I did," you whispered, "but I will always know." Because that's the part no one else got to carry. The boy who asked for honey when he had a fever, the way his hair curled at the nape of his neck, the way he used to press his hand against yours to see how much taller you were getting. The revolution took everything, but it could never take that. Your hair is fully grey now. Your bones ache more often than not. The doctors come less frequently, though they leave powders and instructions and promise you you're still strong for your age. But you feel yourself fading, not tragically, just inevitably. Like a story being told slower and slower until the words no longer come. And you find, strangely, that you're not afraid. You've faced death before, more than once. You've held it in your lap and watched it take everything. Now it comes like a final visitor, unexpected, yes, but not unwelcome. You've lived. Not the life you were promised, not the life anyone expected, but yours. You've carried memory through centuries of change, through empires and republics, through loss and reinvention. And now, as the sun sinks through the windows of this quiet Austrian home, you sit in your chair, hands folded, eyes soft, and you wait, not for a throne, not for redemption, but for rest. Your final years move like a dream that's already begun to forget itself. The world continues without you. Kings dethroned, then reinstated, lines redrawn, names rewritten. France becomes a country of uncertain loyalties and short-term monarchs. It keeps trying to decide what it wants to be. Empire, republic, kingdom, something in between. And through it all, you sit by your window in Frostorf, an emblem no one quite knows how to file away. You don't belong to the new world, but you won't disappear into the old one either. Your body grows slow, but your mind stays sharp. You still notice things, the way the light pools on the tile just before noon, the flutter of sparrows in the chimney, the rhythm of a clock that ticks a second too fast. Your hand trembles more when you write, and your letters come fewer and farther between, but when they arrive, they still carry your voice, dry, observant, gently pointed. You scold a cousin for marrying a fool. You congratulate a young niece for not marrying at all. You send a poem once, unsigned, to a widow in Marseille who lost 3 children to cholera. It simply reads, "The ache is a room that never unlocks, but you may still live in it and decorate the walls." You don't leave the estate anymore. The roads are long, the carriage too jarring. But news still comes to you, filtered through servants, visitors, letters you sometimes read and sometimes fold unread into the drawer by your bedside. You know enough to follow the headlines. Napoleon's ashes returned to France, another failed uprising, another Bourbon cousin trying to rally a cause. You no longer correct anyone's memory. The truth has become fluid, historical, diplomatic. You're tired of reminding people what really happened. And besides, your memories are yours. They are not for sale. There is a young maid, Marie, who brushes your hair each morning. She reminds you impossibly of your mother, not in her appearance but in her hands, gentle but competent, quiet but system strong. You tell her stories sometimes, not the big ones, not about the guillotine or the throne or the temple, but little things. About the kitten that used to curl in your mother's dressing gown, or the day your brother tried to sneak sugar cubes into your pockets before a reception. Marie listens with wide eyes and says, "You should write that down." You smile and say, "Maybe I will," but you won't. Some things are better spoken once and left in the air. You think more often now of the garden at Versailles, not the palace. The garden is what stays, the lavender under your nails, the bees, the long path behind the Queen's Hamlet where the air always smelled faintly of fresh soil and milk. You think of how your brother used to pick daisies and insist on giving you the smallest one because you're the littlest, even though you were 2 years older and twice his size. You can still hear the way he'd laugh when you chased him. You can still feel how warm his hand was in yours. It's those moments that visit you now in the middle of the night, when the wind howls and the fire dims. Not the executions, not the crowd's roar, but his voice, his laugh, your mother's song, your father's last prayer, and in those moments, you feel strangely safe. Visitors come less frequently. Most are too young to remember the world before Napoleon, let alone the girl who survived the revolution. When they do arrive, they bring gifts, pressed flowers, old coins, political pamphlets. They sit across from you in stiff-backed chairs and speak slowly, as if addressing a monument. You nod politely. Sometimes you surprise them by asking questions they can't answer, about trade, about politics, about philosophy. One young man tries to explain his thesis on liberty to you. You smile and say, "I was imprisoned by both kings and republics. Neither holds the patent on cruelty." He stammers. You let him off the hook. The portraits in the hall grow dustier. You instruct the staff to leave them that way. "Let time do its work," you say. "We were never meant to be timeless." You don't want to be frozen in gold frames, not anymore. You want to be remembered as a woman, not an icon, not a headline, not a myth. You sometimes wonder what your mother would have made of your life. You imagine her voice, wry and lilting, saying, "Well, at least you got to grow old, ma chère." You imagine her sitting beside you in the garden, knitting something beautiful and impractical. You imagine her hands warm over yours, reminding you that grace was never about perfection. It was about persistence. You write one last letter, sealed in red wax to a cousin you've never met. In it you say, "I have not been a queen. I have not led armies or passed laws, but I have watched the world change and I have remained myself. That is my reign. That is my resistance. The day you die is a quiet one. No thunder, no omen. Just a slow morning, cool air, the distant sound of someone humming in the corridor. You sit in your chair by the window, wrapped in your shawl, half-read book on your lap. Marie finds you there hours later, your head tilted slightly, as if you'd simply leaned into sleep. There is no final statement, no dramatic pause. Your last words, scrawled the night before in your journal, are simple. I remember, I forgive, I rest. The papers call you the last daughter of France. Historians will argue for decades about your significance, whether you were a tragic figure or a noble one, whether your survival was heroic or incidental. Theories will persist, novels will be written, paintings made, but the truth is softer than any of that. You were a girl who lost everything. You were a woman who refused to disappear. And in the end, you were simply a person who lived. And now, here we are. The lights are dim, the pages have closed, and your breath has finally settled into that slow, even rhythm that comes when a long, quiet journey draws to its end. You've walked through the gilded halls of Versailles, felt the cold stone walls of the temple, heard the rising thunder of the revolution, and sat quietly with Marie-Thérèse as she learned again and again how to survive a world that never once asked if she wanted to. You've watched her as a baby wrapped in royal silk, and as a girl who learned that not even innocence can stop the blade. You've heard the silence of a lost brother's cell. You've sat beside her in the stillness of exile, listened to the rustle of old paper, and watched time melt the sharpest pains into a kind of quiet grace, not perfect, not healed, but still here. And maybe that's what her story is, in the end. Not the tale of a princess or a political relic, not just a victim or survivor, but someone who simply endured. Someone who didn't vanish when the crowd went home. Who aged. Who laughed again, eventually. Who remembered. She outlived kings, emperors, and the very ideals that sought to erase her family's name. And yet, her greatest act wasn't revenge or restoration. It was choosing to live quietly, meaningfully in a world that never stopped demanding that she be more than human. And tonight, as you lie there in the soft hush of your room, maybe there's something comforting in that. That survival doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it rests. So go ahead, let your eyes fall closed. You've made it. She made it.